to start? Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah. Morning, delegates. John O'Brien's Standing Orders Committee, moving Standing Orders Committee Report number 1. And firstly, on behalf of the SOC, I wish everybody a wonderful conference. You received your conference documents either in the online pack or in the pack you received this morning as you came in. Page 1 has the conference sessions for the next 2 days clearly set out, and also their speaking times. So just to remind delegates that the proposers will have 3 minutes, other speakers will have 2 minutes, and then the spokespersons replying to a debate will have 10 minutes speaking time. Please also note the proposal that Dermot Lacey will act as chief teller, and tellers will be sought then in a few moments. And reminder to delegates that when the chair calls for tellers to count a vote, entry and exit from the hall will not be allowed until after the vote, so please respect the doorkeepers on such occasions. Composite motions are set out in Appendix 2. Under the rule, any branch that has a query about its inclusion as a composite motion had until 9 o'clock this morning to approach SOC, and I can advise conference that no branch has approached us on that matter. Therefore, the composite motions are going ahead as set out in the appendix. Elections are set out in point number 5 on SOC 1, and no elections are needed. There are vacancies on SOC for next conference, and nominations have been extended until 2 p.m. today to get your name in if you want to be involved, and I'd encourage you to take up that option. Then just to advise delegates, you'll have received 2 separate sheets of paper on your way in. There were 2 motions that were received in time but regrettably omitted from publication. This was simply an error, but these 2 motions have now been recognised by SOC and are included on the separate sheets. Now, what will happen here is that they will be numbered number 90 and 91 respectively, but they will be allocated to the climate and the local government sections in order of debate. So they'll be included in that section, albeit slightly out of sequence. So the 2 motions regarding climate, one from Jimmy Tully branch, and the other is to do with local authorities issue on dog parks, and that comes from Glen Cullen Sandyford branch. So both of those motions are being included in the programme. So that's the report, and I so move. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So John has moved Standing Orders Report number 1. Is there a seconder for the report? I see Conall O'Boyle. So just in terms of conference, there's a number of seats up on the stage. So in order to speak to, first of all, Standing Orders Report number 1, if there are any speakers, but equally to speak to any of the motions, it's not as straightforward as it seems, in that the access point to get up to sit on the seats before you're speaking to a motion is just the door there. So that door is going to bring you around the side, and any speakers looking to speak to the motions or at any point will be able to sit on the seats that are available. So you really have to state your intent if you're going to be speaking on any of the motions at conference this year. So there's someone there on the door just to assist in bringing comrades around from an accessible. Melissa's there to bring comrades around on the accessible route to get up onto the stage, and it definitely has hints of how you get up on the stage in Liberty Hall if anyone has ever tried to storm the stage there getting up. So there seems to be a lot of similarity there. So John has moved, Connell has seconded the report. If there are any speakers looking to speak to Standing Orders Report number 1. Any speakers to Standing Orders Report number 1? No. Okay, so I'll move then the report to a vote. So the vote on the Standing Orders Report number 1, those in favour of the report? Thank you. Those against? And any abstentions? Okay, great. So we're off to a good start. So Standing Orders Report number 1 has been passed, and I should have just said our Chief Teller for conference is Dermot Lacey. So Dermot's just up there at the front in order to assist on any of the votes. We need to elect now at this point 3 tellers to assist Dermot if there are going to be any votes on any motions. So at this point I'd look for anyone to identify themselves if they'd like to be a teller to assist on what's a very important part of the democratic process, which is to vote on the counts for the vote. So anyone willing to assist in putting themselves forward to be a teller? James Carney, is there a proposer for James? So we've James Kearney identifying Linda O'Sullivan and Lorna. Who's this person? Tyquin Manley. Okay, so we've James, Lorna and Ty then putting themselves forward. Can I put that then to conference floor as well for a proposer and a seconder, just so we can have everything in order as we start off? So I've Conal Boyle and yourself there at the back. So we've our 3 tellers. So now just moving into the exciting part of conference, and thanks very much in terms of dealing with the adoption of Standing Orders Report number 1 and the election of tellers. Not saying Standing Orders is not exciting, it's very important, but thanks very much, John, for moving the report and for being able to get us off to a good start. So next then on the agenda is I'd like to invite Senator Annie Hoey, who's going to welcome us to Dublin Northwest. So Senator Annie Hoey.
So, good morning, conference. I think we're going to need a little more enthusiasm than that to get us through, not only this weekend, but over the next 11 weeks to the local and European elections. So we'll try that once more. Good morning, conference. Excellent. That is the energy we need for us. My name is Annie Hoey, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the Helix in DCU in Dublin Northwest. So we're in the grounds of DCU, an incredible higher education institution that was set up to bridge the gap and create learning opportunities for all. Yet we have a situation in Dublin Northwest where parts of the constituency, depending on your postcode or what ward that you live in, get to go to university. But then other parts of the constituency, depending on what part you live in and what ward you live in, don't get to go to university. And then we have the farcical situation where thousands upon thousands upon thousands of students are currently travelling outrageous distances because there's no accommodation in this constituency, or because they cannot afford the paltry accommodation that there is, because it is just so unbelievably unaffordable. It is an unrealistic option, or else they have to take out a loan, or their parents have to take out a loan so that they can find somewhere to live. So we need properly funded further and higher education. And I've been talking about the funding of further and higher education since I was the president of the Union of Students in Ireland, and there's a couple of USI heads here today. And it wasn't today or yesterday that I was the president of USI. And I think we may have been having debates at conference probably in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, about the future funding of higher education, and we still have not yet sorted it out. And I believe, and everyone in this room, I hope, believes that anyone should be able to access learning opportunities, whatever age they are, and it should be not defined because of how much money you have. I hope while you are here in Dublin Northwest that you will get to explore our constituency over the next couple of days. It is an incredibly vibrant and welcoming constituency, and that became no more evident than we saw the whole community response to the welcoming of those who fled from their home countries to the shores of Ireland, looking for safety, looking for refuge, and looking for somewhere that they could call home, whether temporarily or for long term. I'm incredibly proud, with some members here in the audience, to be a member of Ballymun for All, to be one of the founding members of Finglas for All, and to be involved with Dublin North West Communities Against Racism. And the work we do, I believe, is the key work of the Labour Party. We do not allow... We consistently do not allow for disadvantaged communities to be pitted against other disadvantaged communities. And it is all too easy for people to come into our constituency, people who have no idea what it's like to live in our constituency, who do absolutely nothing for our constituency, who never plant a flower, never clean up anything, never help anyone, never do anything for our constituency. And then they have the audacity to come into our constituency to try and sow and divide, division and hate. And we stood together as a community and we said, absolutely and utterly not. You are not welcome here. The only people who are welcome in this constituency are those who have put their shoulder to the wheel to make it a better place for all, and those who are coming here and seeking refuge, support and help. And those are the Labour values that we, I believe, all of us here over the next weekend are going to be talking about. Values of equality, values of fairness, values of inclusion, justice, care, kindness. Those are the reasons that I'm involved in the Labour Party, and those are the reasons that I was involved with Finglas for All, Ballymun for All, Dublin West Communities Against Racism, where we were building a community that was welcome for people. On my way down here, I passed dozens of boarded up houses. That is happening not across Dublin, it is happening across all of the country, and it is unforgivable. It is unforgivable for people to come into my constituency and your constituencies and to tell people that there isn't enough when we every single day walk by these boarded up houses. There is more than enough for absolutely and utterly everyone on this island who needs it. We have thousands of vacant empty homes, and we have thousands of vacant empty homes in this constituency. Only in the last couple of days, 70 more male asylum seekers came to Ireland from Tuesday, and they don't have anywhere to live. They're living in tents. That is a disgrace when I must have passed at least 70 empty houses on my way down here, and I only live up the road. But I think the Labour Party, we have a plan to deal with some of this, and we're going to discuss those plans over this weekend in terms of housing, in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of the social contract, where we believe that everyone should have enough, not just to get by, but to thrive and to live. And a big challenge that we're going to face coming up to that is, of course, our European elections, and we've got some fantastic candidates. We've got Aon for Dublin, we've got Niamh for the South, and then we have our local election candidates and the local elections. I know some of you here are going to be running the local elections, but you might indulge me for a moment while I talk about the local election candidates in my constituency. We have John Nisbet and John Lonergan, who are going to be running for us in Dublin North West. We've got Ali Field, who's going to be over at a smidge of our constituency after the bit of a redraw. John Lonergan is going to be the youngest candidate that's going to be running for the Labour Party. He's 19 years old, he's a student, and he is putting his shoulder to the wheel on behalf of the Labour Party. So I'm going to ask you to put your shoulder to the wheel. Today we have a raffle that is happening, and we are going to have some kindly people dodging around the place trying to raise funds for Dublin North West and our local election candidates. So I really hope that you might consider supporting our raffle, because, as I said, we have some really great candidates. Both Johns are brilliant. John is a teacher and educates the future and the youth of Ireland, and John Lonergan, as I said, is a student and is going to really put his shoulder to the wheel to stand against some of the really despicable things that are happening in our constituency, but to share our Labour Party values. So on that note, don't forget to donate to our fundraiser. Welcome to Dublin North West. It's my absolute pleasure to have you here, and it is an even bigger pleasure to hand you over to our incredible party leader, Deputy Ivana Bacik.
Ivana Bacik, Fitzgerald Carney branch, Dublin Bay South. I still love saying that every time. Comrades and friends, first, thank you to my dear friend and comrade Annie Hoey for that fantastic welcome, that truly energising welcome. Thank you, Annie. It's not the first time that Annie has haunted the halls of DCU, as you've heard, because as a former president of the Union of Students in Ireland, Annie has been a fearless voice for social justice and for equality all of her life, I think, even before she was president of USI. And last night we heard from so many other young voices in the party at our event looking at housing, looking at a European model for social and affordable housing. We heard as well from our wonderful candidates for the European elections, Aodhán Ó Ríordáin in Dublin and of course Niamh Hourigan in Ireland South. And at last night's meeting, what we spoke about, and I know many of you were there, and some who were there rather late may be delayed coming in this morning as a result, of course, but what we heard about was just how challenging times are now for those in the generation Annie has just spoken up for, the generation represented by so many of our dynamic candidates, people like John Lonergan, who, as Annie has said, is our youngest candidate at age 19. These young people today, Generation Rent, a generation whose public services have been put up for sale, a generation the homes they should have been commodified for other people's profits, and whose planet is burning while the world looks on. We in Labour are fighting with and for a younger generation to take back their future, alongside powerhouse advocates like Annie, like all of you, activists who are committed to achieving change. And it's an honour to be addressing all of you activists this morning as leader of the Labour Party at our 73rd party conference. And I want to thank all of those who've made this conference happen. You'll be hearing shortly from our General Secretary, Billy Sparks, and I want to thank Billy for all her hard work in preparation for this weekend, and to thank And of course, to thank all the staff in head office in Leinster House. I also want to thank our great volunteers, our chairperson, Lisa Connell, who's going to be chairing the conference this weekend. And of course, our party treasurer, Conor Power, sitting discreetly on the end of the podium there, whose work is so important to us. I want to thank John, who's even more discreetly slipped off the stage, but who's stepped in as chair of the Standing Orders Committee. And I want to thank all those on the Standing Orders Committee, and indeed the Executive Board and the Central Council. Again, volunteers, members whose hard work and commitment to this party makes events like this happen and drives us forward. But comrades, my biggest thanks is to you who are here today, Labour activists, Labour members and candidates, our ear to the ground, the conscience of our communities and the backbone of our party and our movement. And come Sunday, after conference finishes, I know we will all be back on the doors, speaking with our neighbours and friends, setting out our vision for this great country in our local communities. Because all around us, we see the consequences of rudderless ruling by other parties who do not believe in our values, who do not believe in the power of the state to change things. And let's be honest, what we have now is a coalition that increasingly does not even believe in itself, with increasing numbers of resignations. And when they say a week is a long time in politics, this week was never was it truer than this week. We see a failing government, a coasting coalition, clinging to office even while it jettisons members, terrified of change. And that's not the politics that we so desperately need now, whether that's in the council chamber, in government buildings, or of course in the European Parliament. Those politics isolate us, and when the far right burn buildings or cities, those politics look the other way. When a greedy few rig the game, those politics say it's just up to the market. But now we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with the elections that we're facing into over the year ahead to create a livable planet, to create thriving communities with homes for all. Yet government politics are plumping for tinkering, not for transformation, and that's wrong. We in Labour know there's a different way, a radical way to change things. And comrades, in politics, courage means doing the right thing, means having the ambition to make real change, believing we can make that change with courage if we put in the work, and trusting that the strength of our communities will pull us through. In Labour, we say what we mean and we mean what we say. We're not beholden to vested interests. We do not ditch our principles for populism, and we're not under any other party's thumb. We have the grit to make known what we stand for. And in saying this, I cannot help but think of our dear friend and comrade Emmett Stagg, who died just last week, and I was proud to represent the party with so many others at his funeral on Thursday. Our thoughts are with Mary, with Gillian and Henry, and with all Emmett's family, his close comrades and friends. I'm privileged to have counted Emmett as a member and a friend, a mentor. Emmett was always a principled politician of the left. He put his ideals into action, and as Housing Minister, he was steadfast in his commitment to delivering public housing on public land. He stood for that so firmly and clearly. How much better off we would be if that idealism and that grit that Emmett showed would be present in government buildings today. He was a man of drive, of passion, and often of cutting wit, and we'll miss him dearly this weekend. But we'll fondly remember the immense contribution he made to our party and to Irish society. Ní bheidh a lehéad ann arís. Comrades, politics has darkened since last we met a year ago in Cork. Global conflict has deepened and man-made famine is a reality, horrifically in Gaza. In Haiti and sub-Saharan Africa, as well as in Ukraine and in Gaza, we're seeing forces of aggression and anarchy devastating the lives of people and of communities. And in Gaza in particular, we think of all those who have lost their lives. Yeah. In Ireland, the political system has stagnated, with government parties showing they're more focused on themselves and on internal power struggles than on the people who elect them and the communities they represent. The Fine Gael contest that has now become a coronation has shown that it seems not even Fine Gael members will get to elect who's going to be the next Taoiseach of the country. And we say, it shouldn't be Fine Gael members in any case. It should be the people of this country who elect the next Taoiseach to bring us through the challenges that we face as a country. I have wished Leo Varadkar well on a personal basis, and I do wish Simon Harris well, as it seems he will be the next Taoiseach. But he will need enormous resolution to make any real change over the brief period of time he will have as Taoiseach. Effectively, he will only be a caretaker Taoiseach. And last night, I called on him as a first act as new Taoiseach to take on our Labour Renters' Rights Bill. If he could do just one thing, and he could do that on the 9th of April when the Dáil sits next, he could adopt that bill, which the government did not oppose 2 years ago. He could reinstate the ban on no-fault evictions, and by doing that alone, he could change the lives of so many people, like the young people we heard from last night, who are stuck in a rental trap of desperate insecurity, unable to see beyond paying off someone else's mortgage, because this government has commodified homes. So I've called on Simon Harris to do that. But he should also now publish increased house building targets, and he should work with us and other opposition parties to pass bills that offer constructive proposals for change. In Labour, we have put forward the Occupied Territories Bill, the Magnitsky Bill, children's rights legislation, and so much more. And Simon Harris, as a Taoiseach, could do that. These are achievable progressive measures that could be delivered if he doesn't have the courage to call a general election. And we have called on him and on the government to do that, because we believe now it's up to the people to make the decision on who leads the country. Comrades, Labour activists don't run scared from tough conversations. We don't use the absolute failure by government to house people as a means of pitting homeless citizens against people seeking asylum here. And we've heard so powerfully from Annie about the work that Labour activists are doing in this constituency and across the country to offer a welcome to those who come here seeking refuge. And I'm so proud of our members and our activists who are so prominent and so much to the fore in setting up groups like D6 and D4 for All in my own constituency, like the Communities Against Racism organisations here in Dublin Northwest. I know across the country, Labour activists and members are showing putting into practice our principles of equality, solidarity and fairness. And conference, in conclusion, these are our principles and our values of equality, of solidarity and fairness. When I look to the candidates who are flying the the red flag for us and running in the elections in June, I know that the passion and strength you bring to your campaign is rooted in those values. We share those values, all of us together. That's our collective endeavour. And that's the future of socialism, of social democracy in this country. We all believe it. We are all optimists. We know that we have the power to change things. And I know that over the next 11 weeks, all of us together will be doing our utmost to change things, to ensure that Labour representatives are present in all the rooms where decisions on change are made, in local councils, in the European Parliament, and whenever the general election comes, in government buildings too. Colleagues and comrades, I look forward to the debates over this coming weekend. I look forward to hearing from all of you, resolute, steadfast activists and comrades, as to the changes you want to see us make over the time ahead, and I look forward to bringing those changes into reality as we progress forward. Onwards and upwards, comrades. Enjoy the weekend. Go raibh maith agaibh go leor.
Thanks very much to Ivana, our party leader, for welcoming us to the Helix. So next we have the General Secretary, Billy Sparks, to give her speech.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 73rd Labour Party National Conference. So I'm really looking forward to catching up with you all over the weekend, and this is most likely going to be our last chance to come together, certainly for the local and European elections, and who knows, maybe even a general election. So given the events this week, we're reminded how important it is to be election ready. And I can assure you that we have an amazing slate of candidates ready to go whenever the next temporary Taoiseach decides to go to the country. But this state of readiness does not happen by accident, and I would like to pay tribute to my colleagues who truly go above and beyond the realms of a normal day job, week in, week out. So to all the staff in head office, the press office, the party leader's office, and in various TD and senators' offices, thank you for all that you do for the party, and I really mean that. They do a huge amount. So we really want the focus of our conference this weekend to be on the nearly 100 local election candidates we have running for us across the country, and the two selected European candidates, Eoin O'Riordan in Dublin and Niamh Hourigan in Ireland South. We plan to select our candidate for Midlands North West in April, just so you're all aware, so we will be running a candidate in each of the European constituencies. No one could accuse any of these candidates of being opportunists. They are in truth activists who have a deep-rooted concern for the people in their communities, people who want to see improvement in the lives of their neighbours, their friends and their communities. They are the backbone of our party, and we are so proud of each and every one of them. I know our focus between now and June the 7th will be to get as many candidates, Labour candidates, elected to council chambers across the country and into the European Parliament. Comrades, we've had a very busy year since we last met in Cork. I want to thank the many members, many of you, who've been out supporting local campaigns, contributing to party policies and donating much needed funds to our election coffers. We know that we will be fighting against much better resource parties in June. So in particular, I want to thank those of you who've signed up to our Bread and Roses fundraising campaign, because it really does make a difference. As members of a political party, we all contribute in our own way. I'm fortunate in my role to witness the commitment and loyalty of members to our cause on a daily basis. But I especially want to thank our party chair, Lisa Connell, our party treasurer, Conor Power, all the members of the Executive Board for their support, guidance and wisdom that they generously offer me. And indeed, huge thanks must go to the Standing Orders Committee for their help in organising conference. We are in very good hands with this great bunch of members, so thank you guys. Finally, it is my great honour to pay tribute to the many treasured members who've left us over the past year. In particular, as Ivana mentioned, I want to acknowledge the passing of former Labour TD Emmett Stagg just this week. Emmett was a loyal comrade to the last, and for those of you who've been coming to party conference for many years, he often played a starring role in these events, and I'm sure he would have loved to be here today with us. But I would like to ask you all now to stand, please, and give a round of applause to those names of members who we have lost over the last year who will appear on the screen behind me. Thank you, comrades, and may they all rest in peace. So that's it for me. I wish you all a very successful, enjoyable and fruitful conference, and I look forward to catching up with you all over the weekend. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kitty, for the General Secretary report. So next we have Conor Power, who's the Party Treasurer, to give his report.
Thanks very much. Good morning, Chair. Thank you so much, Party Leader, General Secretary, Annie, our great candidate in this constituency, and conference. Thank you very much. Conor Power is my name, and I have the pleasure of being elected unopposed as your Party Treasurer for the next year. So thank you very much for that resounding endorsement. No doubt our excellent candidates in the upcoming European and local elections are looking on with envy. They have a much more difficult task, and I hope we're here to help them. First of all, I'd like to thank the General Secretary, Billy Sparks, and our bookkeeper, Jackie Roach, for the great assistance they have in preparing our ongoing accounts and budgets for the year. It's a very important task to keep a party on the even keel. The financial report for the party is contained in the report to conference, and you have full details of the snapshot of our financial position as of 2021 and 2022, which are our most recent audited accounts. There are no great surprises in those reports. Our accounts are on a relatively even keel, as you might expect for our party. Like other parties, I guess our main, unlike some other parties, but like other smaller parties, our main source of income is state funding. Our outgoings are relatively static. Our main resource, of course, are excellent staff, along with administration charges. Ordinarily on the year to year, they're pretty much the same. This year, of course, is a very different year, because there are two significant elections coming up, and of course the possibility of a third given the events of last week. So it's important that we keep an eye on outgoings, and I have to say that the party does a very good job of doing that. It's also important to keep an eye on what's coming in, and I commend all of you on your excellent efforts in fundraising. It's a hard part of the job, but it's a really necessary one. Elections are expensive. In particular, online expenditure is really high. You'd be surprised how much that is, and any of your candidates and your election agents and that are finding this out at the moment. I wish you all the very best in your endeavours in the election. Having a race night, having a lottery really does help. It gets the band together as well, of course, as producing money, and it's a very important activity for the party. Apart from fundraising, the other part of my job is to help out with regulations. The regulatory aspect of elections is something that's really increased in recent years. Local elections are regulated by the local authorities, and the European elections and Dáil elections and Shannon elections are regulated by SIPO. And these are a really important feature of the modern landscape of elections. So I hope we're here as a resource to help all of you with these. There are rules about donations, there are rules about fundraising, there are rules about expenditure. And over the last year I've conducted quite a number of online seminars on these topics. And just for our candidates and their team of people, this can be a difficult enough landscape. And let you know, we're here to help. I really mean that, by the way. You can contact me, you can contact head office with any queries you have about this. It's much better to stay on the right side of the correct side of the regulation in the first instance. So please don't hesitate to ask. I really mean that. We're a party of volunteers, and that's the great resource that we really have. We're here to help each other because we have a common cause to better this country. It's hard enough going for election without having to worry about these regulatory aspects as well. Advice is there to help. So finally, I thank you for all your efforts, and I thank and wish the very best to all our candidates in the upcoming local and European elections. Thank you, Conference.
Thanks, Conor. So we're moving into plenary session number 1 now. So we've 3 distinctive areas that we're going to be debating under this section. So what we're going to do is we'll deal with each section as a standalone area. So we'll come to the first section under climate, and we'll deal with, there's 4 motions we need to deal with under climate in line with Standing Orders Report number 1, where there's that additional motion called motion number 90 in the name of the Jimmy Tully branch. So we'll come to the first section and we'll deal with each section and the motions relating to it. And within that, we'll need a mover and a seconder for each motion. And after each motion has been moved and seconded, we'll then come to common debate at the end before inviting the party spokesperson on each area to respond to the debate before we then move into voting on each of those sections. So under plenary session number 1, we're dealing with motions 1, 2, 3 and number 90. So again, just as I outlined earlier, if anyone is looking to speak to any of the motions or under common debate, the way up to the stage is just this door on everyone's left, my right, and Melissa is standing there to assist to bring comrades around in order to be able to sit on the stage prior to speaking to the motion. So each mover will have 3 minutes, each seconder then will have 2 minutes. And anyone who is speaking to any of the motions, in line with normal practice, if you could just state your name and the branch or constituency that you're speaking on behalf in relation to, and then we will be coming then to plenary session number 2 at 11:30, and that session will be televised. So from 12 o'clock we're going to have conference televised on RTE. So not to flag an early problem, but to flag an early problem, we have time constraints in order to be able to get to that point. So moving straight on to the climate session of conference. So I'd like to invite the mover from Dublin, Fingal, to move motion number 1. Great. Councillor Breen McDonagh.
I'm going to propose it and Deputy Duncan Smith is going to second it. Welcome. Thank you, Fáilte Rómhaith go léir, for being here this early on what looks like a dry technical motion, but actually stands to the heart and the core of Labour values. Because what we believe in is, as Ivana said, is fighting against vested interests and protecting the fundamental rights of people, but doing so in a manner that is based on evidence and humanity. And so what we have here is a motion that is born out of a conflict that is going on between a profit-driven DAA that has been led for the last 3 chief executives by people from the private sector who fundamentally have lost the trust of the communities around them, but also of their own workers and the people who should be partners in pushing this forward. The thing that changed this for me was that the WHO have stated unequivocally that aircraft noise, whether you experience it or not, will damage your health if you're exposed to too much of it. This goes along with climate because we also know that we cannot have expansion of carbon emissions without taking into account the impact of it. But what we have is a DAA that are refusing completely to engage on a scientific basis with many of these issues. So the problem that we face is that it has created a divide. And unfortunately, one of the worst transport ministers we've had, probably the worst transport minister we've had, Shane Ross, decided that a body which has a function that we need, which is the Aircraft Noise Competent Authority, whose job is to try and assess this incredibly complex scientific problem and generate the evidence for us then to decide how we should manage the noise that people are exposed to. But unfortunately, he decided because nobody else wanted, he'd give it to Fingal County Council. Fingal County Council, a huge proportion of our revenues come from the DAA in the form of rates. And this body exists as a standalone, completely isolated, completely unanswerable to councillors. Their own chief executive isn't even supposed to answer to it. And it is a body whose job is supposed to be about monitoring the environmental impact of noise. So why would you give it to Fingal County Council? There isn't anybody on any side of this debate who could have any objection to giving it to a body whose job is to monitor the environmental impact of emissions of all kinds of things. So this is a very basic motion. I hope the conference will support it. I know Duncan has legislation drafted through the Dáil. And the problem that it exposes is that it undermines the trust of the people in the council, in the democratic process, and I hope that you'll support this motion. Thank you very much.
seconder for motion number 1?
Thank you. Duncan Smith, Swords Branch, Dublin Fingal. As Breen mentioned, I have a bill that I've drafted that is with the Bills Office that I'm hoping to present to the Dáil in the next few weeks in relation to this. I would love the endorsement of conference. This bill was not drafted before our last conference, it's been drafted subsequently. This bill speaks to our historical position on this, our historical commitment to good planning, to good environment, and also just to speak to some of the national narrative that has gone out about this issue, in that which is perpetuated by the Chief Executive of Ryanair and other airlines, that there are just a few cranks in Dublin Fingal who are surprised they live beside an airport and can't put up with noise. I can assure you that the people, the many, many hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people that have issues with Dublin Airport Authority and how they are running our airport people, their airport families. They understand the airport, they understand aviation, but they also believe in good planning. They also believe in having a local environment that is healthy and indeed a planet that's going to work. They are the most dedicated bunch of residents and community groups that I've had the privilege to work with, and they're fighting an absolute beast and a behemoth. And the outgoing Taoiseach actually did something at the back end of last year when the DAA put in what is the largest planning application in the history of Fingal County Council. The Taoiseach of the day actually made a public comment endorsing the passing of that. That is absolutely outrageous. We're not allowed to do it as public representatives, as councillors in local county councils, but the Taoiseach was allowed to come in on it. So that's what we're up against here. So it's a good bill. We were against this, the setting up of ANCA in the last Dáil. The Labour Party voted against it. We're sticking true to our principles. Put it in with the EPA. We'd love the endorsement of conference so I can bring this to the Dáil with the full confidence of the party behind me. Thank you.
Motion 2 in the name of Central Council. James Carney.
Hi folks. James Carney, Hugh Nevin, Killiney Shankill Branch, Dunleary constituency. In proposing this motion, it's rather broadly written, but I think it's important that people like myself and Conall, who's proposing the motion after me as a climate generation, do put these issues forward. Senator Annie Hoey mentioned that our youngest candidate, John Onaghan, being the age of 19, are the people who are going to experience climate catastrophe much more than many of the rest of us in this room. I don't exclude myself from that, but especially people younger than myself. But in terms of the motion itself, so one of the few competencies that our local authorities do have is in relation to climate and biodiversity. But this needs to be effectively strengthened. Senator Mark Wall's legislation on illegal dumping has effectively been co-opted by the government, which is welcome. But as I've had an experience as a first-time candidate trying to deal with DLR, I've been told it's not as simple as turning on CCTV cameras. There is steps and steps and processes. And we just need to step up our game when it comes to climate, biodiversity and protecting the environment. We need to treat it as one of, if not the most important issue. Like housing, climate is an everything problem. There's no houses on a dead planet, much like there are no jobs on a dead planet. And I'm proud that DLR, despite the little issue I mentioned there, has shown great leadership in issues like the Living Streets programme. This despite deliberate obstruction by local Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael councillors and TDs. If we don't accept even the possibility that mild discomfort might make our towns more climate friendly, then we're sunk when it comes to larger issues such as agriculture and transport. This is why climate also needs to be the heart of our EU policy and our mission statement with the Green New Deal. Although Fine Gael MEPs defected on this issue, they can't be trusted as an EPP Parliament or EPP European Parliament member when it comes to climate. We also can't trust those who will see which way the wind is blowing before they decide to vote on climate issues. And that's how we have to make up our mind when we vote for European Parliament candidates on climate issues. On biodiversity and environmental future is something to be embraced, not feared. It leads to better health, better jobs, better communities, and yes, it does lead to better business opportunities. To this, climate activism does start locally. We have to start to make sure our local councils and national bodies are equipped to change Ireland from a climate laggard to a climate leader. And I propose a motion to conference. Thank you very much.
Is there a seconder for motion 2? Conall O'Boyle.
Gormagat, Lisa, Conal O'Boyle, Carlo Calciani. I know it doesn't sound like that, but and also Executive Board. And I'd like to just start by thanking Lisa, Billy, Ivana, and my colleagues on the Executive Board for giving me a great hand in my first year. And I'm delighted to serve for a second term following this conference. So thank you again. When I became the youngest speaker ever at the McGill Summer School in 2019, I raised the point that the state needs to take a real proactive role in the fundamentals of a new economy based on the principles of sustainability, you know. And a lot of this, you know, delivery of offshore wind. We live in an island, you know, a state retrofitting company, etc. These are radical proposals, and I think this speaks very well of the Labour Party and the radical position that we actually want to take. You know, the Green Party ran on this agenda. They've failed us, I think. I think there will be a lot of regret from them when their term in government ends. But this is actually now the point where we need to get serious at this conference on where we are on climate. There are a number of very radical proposals here. There's stuff that I like in this. There's stuff that will be genuinely and fundamentally effective in how we live our lives in this country in the years to come. So look, I think this is a great motion, and I am happy to endorse it and support it. Thank you.
So moving on to motion 3 in the name of Central Council, is there a mover for motion number 3? So Senator Rebecca Moynihan to formally move it. Is there a seconder then for motion number 3? Councillor Brian McDonough. And then the fourth motion we're dealing with under the climate section is motion 90 in the name of the Jimmy Tully branch, in line with what was presented in Standing Orders Report number 1. So Councillor Elaine McGuinty,
yes,
moving motion 90.
And Senator Annie Hoey is going to second it. Good morning, comrades. Elaine McGuinty, Jimmy Tully branch and Meath County Councillor. I've always been passionate about the environment, nature and the role farming plays in this country. I am absolutely dismayed at this government's treatment of farmers and the products they produce. So this motion, I want to take you on a journey, and I want you to imagine a future where the food on your plate is produced locally, a testament to sustainable farming, a greener, healthier Ireland. And this isn't just a dream, it's a vision the Labour Party should be committed to turning into reality. Today, we stand at a critical juncture in this country's history where the choices we make can either perpetuate an environmental crisis or lead us towards a sustainable future. This motion proposes a radical shift in the way government does procurement. The immense buying power of the state will drive this change. Why do we need to do this? Because our planet cannot sustain the trajectory we are on. We must embrace different ways of doing things. But this isn't just about saving the planet. It's also about revitalising local economies, how we farm food, our food security. By investing in local producers, we create jobs, we stimulate our local economy, we reduce our reliance on imported food. This isn't just good for the environment, but it's good for communities across Ireland. And we all know that rural Ireland is being left down by this government. This radical food procurement policy will foster a deeper connection between farmers and the public. We'll understand the food story. It's no longer anonymous. This story of hard work, dedication of our farmers, our land, and the award-winning produce that we produce in this country that's recognised all over the world. As we stand on the precipice of a climate crisis, we can't afford to delay any longer, and the time for half measures is well over. We need change. We need bold, visionary politics to change the way we're doing business. And this will set us on a path to a more sustainable future. I urge you to support this motion. Join us in sharing and shaping a future where every meal is a statement to our commitment to our planet, to our local economies, to our communities, and to future generations. Together, let's build a better future. Garmaga.
Thanks, Elaine. So a seconder for motion 90, Senator Annie Hoey to formally second. And then now it's common debate on the 4 motions that have been debated. So I'll take any speakers who will have 2 minutes who would like to speak to any of the motions that have been moved to the floor. Seamus? Councillor Seamus Ryan.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, delegates. This motion reads that this conference calls on the government to introduce a €9 monthly climate transport ticket, which will help to shift people away from using cars as Ireland seeks.
Apologies to interrupt you in the middle of your motion.
Pardon?
Are you looking to move a motion under transport?
Yes.
Apologies, I'm just taking anyone who'd like to speak to the motions 1, 2, 3 and motion 90 under the name of the Jimmy Tully branch. Any speakers indicating to speak to any of the motions? No? Okay, so I'm going to invite our party spokesperson then to respond to the debate under the climate section. So, Senator Rebecca Moynihan.
Thank you, delegates, and I want to thank each of the members who put in very well thought out, well researched motions. The climate crisis is going to be one of the biggest challenges of this century, and we need strong leadership and a climate vision that includes everybody and not just those that can afford to transition. Working class and rural communities are feeling the effects of high energy costs, lack of green and biodiverse spaces, long commutes, high petrol prices, and the loss of formerly secure employment in places like the Midlands. Small farmers are the ones who are suffering under the industrialisation and consolidation of agriculture and the power of large retailers. We must be empowered not just to achieve a climate transition, but a just transition. And that means putting people and the state at the heart of our climate response. A collective issue requires collective action, and we cannot afford to leave ordinary people behind in our efforts to curb climate change. And we must pivot from our response at the moment, which is the private sector, who has the patented technology and money, or people who can borrow to retrofit their house, from the climate policy of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, if we want to build a sustainable Ireland for all. And people are floundering in the face of ever-rising energy costs and failing private housing and care system. But transitioning doesn't mean that it has to be punishing. And that's the key message that I think that Labour should put on the table. We're not here to punish people, but what we are here to do is have a transition that is made easy for people and includes at the heart of the response a state-led response that benefits Ireland and not just the private interests. A state-led response that gives people quality and secure employment again in areas that have been decimated, and a better quality of life for people living in warmer homes, less commuting, better public spaces. And to do the state coordination, not just state money must be at the centre of the response. So where it can't be done by the state directly, the state must empower individuals to take those actions to realise a carbon neutral Ireland. We need to play a bigger role in the provision of renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure. And only the state can undertake that kind of monumental transition that is needed, focused on equal distribution of resources instead of the private profiteering and selling off of our key assets, such as the marine environment, to those with the money to invest in technology at this stage. The kind of resources needed: electricity, water supplies, wind farms, hydroelectric power stations, provide a necessary public good and therefore should fall into public ownership under a new era of semi-state companies to ensure energy security. And that's consistent with proposals, for example, that we see in the third motion of the agenda: nationalisation of waste management and the refocusing of public bodies, such as the Office of Public Works, which are key to achieving our legal obligations. Environmental issues also intersect every other area in Ireland. It affects transport, it affects housing, it affects all public services. With regard to transport and housing and the provision of public services, environmental considerations need to be carefully balanced against other interests when considering long-term planning and development plans. We cannot be using the climate as a reason to oppose building housing or infrastructure, because we are ambitious not just for the climate, but we are ambitious for an Ireland that works, that houses all, that provides connected public transport and that tackles climate change. We will ensure that the National Planning Framework suitably addresses environmental concerns by expanding rural public transport infrastructure to mitigate emissions from vehicles, by prioritising and expediting planning approval for new large-scale housing developments that integrate climate measures into our built environment, to ensure that developments are energy efficient and sustainable, and the state needs to lead the way on this, and that every new social housing development constructed by the state needs to be energy efficient to the highest degree to create warmer, cheaper homes for those who are on the state housing list. We also need local authorities to facilitate street by street, estate by estate and district by district retrofitting programmes to ensure that nobody is left behind, not people who can put in that forward investment and not renters either. And we need to include the provision of offshore wind and solar power generation to be done through the resources of the ESB, Bord na Móna, EirGrid, and encourage cooperatives and local buy-in of energy production and not just the large companies to benefit from what are our natural resources such as wind and to a lesser extent solar. Rising energy costs are one of the main contributors to the cost of living crisis, and we need to see stronger welfare states supporting those who are unable to cover the cost out of their own pocket, and we need to see state action to rapidly reduce energy costs. But there is no point in relying on fossil fuels when scarcity will only continue to drive up prices into the long term. We can kill two birds with one stone if we adopt both cost-saving and environmental-saving measures to tackle these problems. One of the best ways we can do this is by providing more suitable grants and public funds to see the retrofitting of homes and premises all over the country to increase energy efficiency in our built environment and bring down costs for individuals. But that cannot be done the way that we're doing it now, where we see people having to invest hundreds of thousands before their home is warm, leaving it up only to people who have access to money to be able to have warm homes, and it cannot be done where we see such long waiting lists through things such as the Warmer Home Scheme. It is vital that the state set up a state retrofitting company that can actively retrofit rentals, social housing and support individuals who are falling between the cracks. We can do this by increasing the value of the SEAA grants, but more crucially, we need to empower local authorities to take the lead in a coordination effort by conducting street-to-street, house-to-house analysis of where needs to be retrofit. A lot of environmental planning can seem to be punishing, but it doesn't have to be. We can create a better Ireland by tackling and having a just transition. Our focus needs to be on making climate-friendly action accessible. I'm hopeful for the future of climate. I'm not one of those doomsday people. We can transition to a decarbonised energy system. We can create highly paid, quality jobs in communities on the edge and communities who formerly relied on fossil fuels to have high quality jobs for them. We can improve people's quality of life by having warmer homes. We can have safer active travels and we can have greener communities. We already have the natural resources and the technology to do this. We just need the political will to transform and put collective action at the centre of how we deliver a climate and just transition. The crux of the argument is this. Failure to act will result in higher energy costs, supply outages, flooding, deterioration in infrastructure and ecosystems. We cannot allow laissez-faire policies to ruin our environment, increase costs, reduce our quality of living. It is time for a just transition. It is time for a labour transition. It is time for a transition that puts quality jobs at the heart of it, and it is time to take our resources back into public ownership and deliver a climate transition that is radical, but with people and jobs and workers' rights at the very, very heart of it.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. So we're going to move to a vote now on the motions under the climate section. So motion number 1, which was a motion moved and from Dublin Fingal constituency. Those in favour by show of delegate cards for motion number 1. Those against? Abstentions? Motion 1 is carried. Motion 2 then in the name of Central Council. Those in favour by show of delegate cards. Those against? Abstentions? Motion 2 is carried. And then motion 3 again in the name of Central Council. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 3 is carried, and then the final motion under climate, motion 90 in the name of the Jimmy Tully branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 90 is carried. Okay, so we've dealt with the section now under climate, so thanks to our Percy spokesperson Rebecca Moynihan for responding to the debate. So the next section under plenary session 1 is in relation to transport. So we've motion 4, 5, 6 and 7 to deal with under this section. So again, if anyone's indicating to speak, to move, to second or to respond in common debate, again you can just access the stage to your left where Melissa is standing there. So motion number 4 in the name of the Waterford City South branch. Apologies, Seamus, for calling you up earlier. So Councillor Seamus Ryan to move motion number 4.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's always good to get a second chance to come up. But delegates, chairperson delegates, this motion reads that this conference calls on the government to introduce a €9 monthly climate transport ticket, which will help to shift people away from using cars as Ireland seeks to meet its climate targets. Labour is calling for the introduction of a monthly flat rate €9 climate transport ticket to help people make the move to public transport, save on cost of fuel and help Ireland to meet our ever-distant emission targets. Modelled on a similar scheme which was introduced in Germany very successfully, the ticket would entitle people across the country to unlimited travel across all modes of public transport for just €9 a month. If we are serious about achieving our net zero targets, we need carrots, not just sticks. We need to take practical measures that will make a difference, and we need to see leadership from our government on the issue, which we're not getting at the moment. Figures made available to the Labour Party estimate that the carbon emission savings of such a policy would be equivalent to removing 23,000 cars off the road. And I think that's worth repeating, 23,000 cars to be taken off our roads. It's time the government was brave enough to make radical steps towards a cleaner, greener future. So let's have Ireland stand shoulder to shoulder with other countries determined to combat the effects of climate change. I want to commend my colleague and candidate in Cork City East Ward, Peter Horgan, who's here this morning, and my colleagues in Waterford, Tramore Waterford City West candidate Mairead McKnight, Councillor Thomas Phelan and Councillor John Pratt, who are also here this morning, who have been big proponents of the climate ticket. This climate ticket would allow unlimited public transport access for €9 a month. And I'm calling on the government this morning to trial the climate ticket in Waterford. So let the government take a brave step and introduce a practical measure that will reduce traffic emissions in our city and in Tramore and County Waterford. Delegates, I propose the motion.
Thanks, Seamus. So is there a seconder for motion 4? A formal seconder? Sean Sherlock. Thanks, Sean. So motion 5 then in the name of the Bray James Conley branch.
Friends, delegates, Ian McGahan, Bray, Labour, James Conley branch. Conference, if we are serious about climate change in this country, we need huge public investment in our public transport system. But I fear the National Transport Authority have dragged their heels for an awful long time in terms of that public investment. For 7 or 8 years now, they've been promising us in the Dublin region many positive changes in what's called bus connects. But in the past, in my own area of Bray and Enniskerry, they created a bit of a mess, to be honest, where they amalgamated two routes and left people who commuted from Enniskerry to Bray Dart Station to detour half an hour through an estate. Conference, we badly need the proposed bus connect changes in the area of North Wicklow to start. My colleague Anne Ferris in Bray East has contacted the National Transport Authority many times about these changes, and we have been promised them to happen in 2022, we have been promised them to happen in 2023. They need to happen this year. We need these changes badly. The Bray and Enniskerry and Greystones areas have many more houses now since these proposed public transport changes were made 6 years ago. We need them yesterday. Conference, vote for the motion, please.
Seconder for motion 5. Formal seconder, James Kearney. Thanks, James. So motion 6 then in the name of the Meath East constituency. Eilish Balfe.
Good morning, Conference. My name is Eilish Balfe, Meath East. Public transport in rural Ireland is not fit for purpose for commuting, for workers, students, shoppers, those seeking medical treatment or socialising. Census 2022 results show that Meath was one of the fastest growing counties in the country, with the population growing by 13% in 6 years. In 2022, Rathote's population almost doubled in 20 years to near 12,000. And despite this growth, transport quality is still similar to levels experienced in the mid to late 90s when Rathote was a rural village. Rathote and surrounding villages were seen as the new suburbs developing around Dublin. However, government transport policy did not keep up with the rapid growth of Meath East villages and towns. We have inadequate bus services in Rathote and right up to Navan and beyond. Meath is often referred to as the commuter county to Dublin, but it lacks the public transport such as rail and bus services that commuters need. Government policy should not compound the urban and rural divide when it comes to transport services, yet we still have towns in rural Meath that have no bus service at all. There is practically no public transport between towns and villages in Meath, and commuters have to take to their cars just to drive to the nearest village to access links to Dublin and other areas. I have received a long list of detailed submissions from the residents of Meath East who are frustrated about the lack of reliable transport. And despite the NTA acknowledging the poor standard over the years, nothing has improved. There has been no strong political will to improve this situation. Good public transport is not just about getting from A to B. It's about social inclusion, and it plays a crucial role in fostering that in several ways. Accessibility. Public transport should ensure that everyone, including those with disabilities or limited mobility, can access essential services. However, on our public transport, a wheelchair user must give 24 hours notice that takes away any freedom in their life. Affordability and environmental sustainability. The Labour Party has increasingly called for a €9 a month ticket to reduce the reliance on private vehicles and to help mitigate environmental pollution and climate change, creating a more sustainable and livable environment. Reducing social isolation. For people who don't have access to private vehicles, public transport provides a means to connect with their communities, reducing social isolation and fostering a sense of belonging. Fostering independence for our teenagers and young adults so they're not dependent on their parents. For our older persons so they can fully participate in society without depending on family members to access essential services. However, this will only be really fully realised when the rural communities are served by local links or served by extending existing bus route services. Public policy plays an important role in this, and I call on Conference today to support a direct route from Rathote to Dublin, a feeder bus to the M3 train station, extend existing bus routes to rural parts, more local links between towns and villages, and to build and support a public transport system for County Meath that is accessible, affordable, reliable and safe. Public transport not only facilitates physical movement, but it also serves as a cornerstone for building inclusive and vibrant communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Eilish. Is there a seconder for motion 6? John O'Dowd formally seconding motion 6. So motion 7, which is the final motion then under the transport section. You'd like to speak to the motion? Yep, no problem. Okay, so motion 6.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to Eilish. Dennis Leonard, Kinnegad branch, Longford Westmeath constituency. I couldn't support her motion more vehemently. It is something that I've campaigned for 25 years in rural Ireland. I'm in the adjoining county. I happen to work in Dunboyne, and everything Eilish says is true about local transport in Meath East. In Westmeath, believe it or not, it's even worse. We have a local railway station in Calucan, which was closed in the 60s. It would serve 16,000 people within 10 kilometres. It could be open for 5 to 7 million, and yet Irish Rail has sat on it for the last 20 years, refusing to open it and pushing us into a 2-hour commute to Dublin, where the majority of people who live in Kinnegad, Calucan, East Mullingar are actually commuters who are forced onto the M4 and not even put a proper bus corridor on it. When I moved to Kinnegad 25 years ago, we had buses to Sligo, buses to Castlebar, buses to Galway on a regular basis. All of them had been pulled, sometimes operated by private operators. Bus Éireann has effectively abandoned large sections of rural Ireland. When you look at the cost of public transport, we're looking at the metro, and it's a wonderful project here in Dublin, and I welcome it. But it's going to cost about €10,000 for if every one of the 1 million people in Dublin used it. In Calucan Station, it would cost $300 per person if the 16,000 of us who live within 10 kilometres had access to our railway station. There are actually universities in Sligo, DCU here, Maynooth, Trinity, everyone is along that rail corridor, and yet the train stops there 8 times a day and they refuse to let people on or off. So really what we need is a proper, fit-for-purpose public transport. We had 3 times the amount of rail lines in rural Ireland we had in 1900 that we have today. They call this progress, but it's not. Rural Ireland is being left behind, and I want to vehemently second this motion, because unless we get our act together, we will have rural isolation. The Greens want to pull the car parking spaces out of estates all over the Midlands, and where do you go then? You leave people completely isolated without a public transport option. Public transport needs to happen now.
Thanks, Dennis. So that was Dennis Leonard's seconding motion number 6. So the final motion, motion 7, under the transport section, a mover for motion 7. Peter Horgan.
Good morning. My name is Peter Horgan and I am a candidate for Cork City Council in the South East Ward. Cork City is congested. It's over-congested. Douglas is congested, Carrigaline, Toker, Blackpool. We're all congested, even in Blackrock. And last year, Cork City Council came out and said the roads were over capacity. And that's it. No follow-up statement, no resolution, no solutions. Data from TomTom shows that Cork commuters spent an additional 57 hours in congested traffic in 2023 at an additional cost of €128 per motorist. So what's the solution? The solution is more public transport, better public transport. We need to see the Bus Connect's plan in Cork front-loaded away from the corridors which are causing so much angst in the city at the moment. We need to see the tackling of occurrences of disappearing buses. We need to equip the Cork fleet with leap card, tap-on technology, like in Dublin, with dual onboarding. But when we raise this with the Minister for Transport, he passes the buck to the NTA. The NTA then tell us it's a matter for the Minister for Transport and Funding, and it won't happen until 2026, if at all. But they already spent €2.5 million on a Cork-Lewis with no route. And all the while, the programme for government commitment to examine bus rapid transport gets ignored. They still have no decision on the Northern Distributor Road. There's no additional park and rides in the city. And all the while, congestion rages in Cork, causing more emissions, more cost to commuters, and no champion of public transport in City Hall. The coalition of chaos can choose to front-load the congestion measures that I've raised and more, but it's vital that this party, that the Labour Party, advances the needs of Bus Connects beyond the corridors, including the climate ticket as outlined earlier. And we want to see a pilot in Cork too. Most importantly, though, we have to remove the stranglehold of Dublin on the National Authority, on the National Transport Authority. We have to remove the Dublin City Manager as a board member in perpetuity on that body. We deserve a real National Transport Authority, not just a Dublin Transport Authority, and this party should not and will not be found wanting in that regard.
Thanks, Peter. Is there a seconder for motion 7? John Mart formally second motion 7. Okay, so we're moving into common debate now on motions 4, 5, 6 and 7. So if there's any speakers who are indicating to speak to any of these motions, I'll take them now. There's 2 minutes to speak to any of the motions. No? So no one indicating to speak. So I'll call on Deputy Duncan Smith, who's going to respond as the party spokesperson to the section under transport.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to commend and recommend all 4 motions before us under the transport section. I think the Labour Party is perfectly placed to combine both ambition as well as common sense in terms of transport. All these motions, I think, are reflected in all our constituencies. I note the Meath East constituency, the matters of public transport and isolation and being unable to connect with Dublin City, the nearest city where an awful lot of the commuters work. The reason why Rathode has doubled in size is because people have moved out mainly from Dublin. The reason that Swords, where I live, has grown so much has people have moved out, like myself, from Dublin City, moved out from this fine constituency. And transport, the further you leave the main conurbations, the worse it gets. And I think it was very apt to have Dennis come up and talk about the matters in Westmeath. There are solutions here. Calucan Station is a solution. It's a low-cost solution. It's a solution that can be delivered. That would help an awful lot of people get an awful lot of cars on the road. Actually rolling out a bus service that's going to actually genuinely meet the needs of rural communities will help, and it's something that can be delivered. One aspect of this which I have been pushing is staffing. Dublin Bus, Bus Éireann, the local links that exist, they do have issues in terms of hiring staff. When you ask them why that's the case, they say they can't afford housing, which is going to be the theme, the undercurrent theme of all these sessions over the course of these 2 days is access to housing, the cost of housing, the price of housing. It used to be in the day when you got a job, particularly one of the state companies, state transport companies, it was a good job. You could afford a home, you could afford a holiday, you could afford a Christmas, you could live a decent life. That is not the case for many at the moment, and these transport companies are struggling to hire staff. But we as a party have a duty at local level, at national level, to be ambitious in terms of transport, in terms of active travel, in terms of supporting pedestrianisations, in terms of supporting cycle lanes. And it's not about out-greening the greens. It's about doing what's right. It's about doing what's right for our towns and villages and for our communities. But it's also about being ambitious. It's about supporting bus connects beyond the main cities. I feel totally let down by bus connects in North County Dublin. I feel it stops at the M50, and I think this is what Ian McGahan was saying about North Wicklow. Bus connects isn't being rolled out quick enough, and it's certainly running out of steam and ambition the further you get away from Dublin City. And as Peter says, in terms of Cork, the front loading we need, and I've been working very closely with Peter on this, there is a Dublin-centric view to the NTA, and that needs to change. We need to see the NTA become a true national transport authority. And we need to see the big ambitious projects. We need to see Metrolink delivered. I'm hoping when this conference is here next in DCU in the Helix, I'm hoping we can get the Metro. I'm hoping I can get the Metrolink here, and I'm hoping many others in Dublin get the Metrolink here. So we need it. We need to look at Dart Underground. We need to look at Lewis for Cork. We need to look at the big infrastructure projects. This country's population is only going to grow. We are still underpopulated. We have an awful lot more headroom in terms of population, and we need the infrastructure to follow it, and it has to be big. It can't be more lanes on dual carriageways or lanes on motorways, because that would just lead to more cars and that would just lead to more congestion. We see that most clearly in the Dublin region on the M50. They could add more lanes to that and all you're going to get is a larger traffic jam. Let's be ambitious. We're the Labour Party. It's a state-led solution to all of this. I commend all these motions to the floor, and I'm here as our transport spokesperson to any of you to advocate for good, progressive, climate-friendly, people-friendly, community-friendly transport solutions and initiatives in your area. Thank you.
Great, thanks Duncan for your response to the motions under transport. So again, we'll take each motion and I'll put a vote to the conference floor then under each of those motions. So the first motion we dealt with was motion number 4 in the name of the Waterford City South branch. Again, using delegate cards showing those in favour of motion number 4. Those against? Abstentions? So motion 4 is carried. Motion 5 then in the name of the Bray James Connolly branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 5 is carried. And then motion 6 in the name of the Meath East constituency. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 6 is carried, and then motion 7 in the name of the Blackrock Mahon branch, Cork South Central. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Great, so motion 7 then is carried as well. So thanks to Duncan for responding to the debate under transport, and then to move to our final section under session 1, we're dealing with the area of work and workers' rights. So we have the next 30 minutes, so we're going in line with the conference agenda to deal with the motions 8, motion 9, motion 10, motion 11, motion 12, motion 13, motion 14 and motion 15 under this section. So again, anyone indicating to speak under any of the motions, just again, the access point up to the stage is to your left. So I'll call on the mover of motion 8, which is in the name of the UCC Labour branch. Tyquil Manley.
Thank you, Lisa. Tyquil Manley, Chairperson of the UCC Labour Society and Chairperson of Labour Youth. Delegates, friends, members of Labour and those affiliated with the wider trade union movement. As we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, it was front-facing workers working in retail settings, working in transport settings, and working in hospitals, particularly the A&E settings, that kept our country alive. If it was not for these front-facing workers, our economy and indeed our society could not sustain itself. That is why, in Labour Youth, we are calling on the senior party to draft a bill that would specifically deal with the issue of supporting front-facing workers who deal and are victims of verbal and physical abuse. The issue of verbal and physical abuse is on the rise, and it is ever present. Reports by both the Department of Justice and An Garda Síochána have made it clear. It is not a new issue, but it is a fastly growing problem. Retail workers in particular are expected to protect the law by restricting access to goods such as alcohol and cigarettes. And despite their expectation to protect the law, it is evident that the existing law does not sufficiently protect them. That is why, in Labour Youth, we believe that there should be an amendment to the existing Criminal Justice Public Order Act 1994 to provide specific supports for workers who are victimised by dreadful incidents of verbal and physical abuse. We have seen in Britain, our sister party in the UK, introduced back in 2018 the Assaults on Retail Workers Offences Bill brought forward by Alex Norris MP. Unfortunately, as we know, given the current scenario in UK politics, it is clear that that will probably, for at least maybe a year up to December, there will be little progress on that. However, we believe that in Ireland, it is an issue that should be brought to the table as well. There is also a clear gender-based violence dynamic to this. One such report by An Garda Síochána showed that female workers, and particularly young female workers, many of whom are students and young people, are more likely to be subject to attacks and assaults in a retail setting. While the existing legislation does provide some protections, we do believe that there should be a statutory basis for supports in relation to counselling and other support services, and if necessary, short-term leave in the immediate aftermath of such situations. I believe that it is not just a matter of urgency, it is a matter of profound societal importance. Without retail workers, you could not buy basic goods such as food and water, clothes. And that is why we need to respect those who live and toil to serve society and to serve our needs. I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyke. And Tyke is carrying on a long family tradition. His grandfather was a Labour Party TD and served with other Labour Party stalwarts like Tom Johnson. So interesting conversations, I think, to be had with Tyke later on this evening. Thanks, Tyke. So is there a seconder for motion 8? To formally second motion 8? Great. Thanks, Sean O'Horgan. So motion 9 in the name of the Tralee Rock Street branch.
Thanks, Chair. Delegates, my name is Mike Kennedy. I'm the local area candidate for Cork-Raguena, the Dingle constituency. Thank you for taking the time. This motion reads, government agencies like the IDA tasked with bringing foreign direct investment into Ireland to secure better paying jobs. And it's clear that the IDA is doing their job in doing that and bringing the better paying jobs into our cities, likes of Dublin, Cork, but are forgetting about our smaller rural areas like Cork-Raguena. For me, the biggest thing, I am calling on conference to petition the IDA to look at Dingle Peninsula and not just for their holidays. The only time I believe we meet people from the IDA on the Dingle Peninsula and Cork-Raguena as a whole is why they're there on their holidays. Most of our employment is solely based on tourism, seasonal-based jobs, not great paid jobs. Our local people, our youth, are leaving the peninsula when our youth leave to head to college when they turn 18 and finish school. We don't tend to see them come back and resettle in the area because we don't have the well-paying jobs that the town and the area deserves to have. We have a well-educated youth that would love to stay and continue our traditions as Gaelga, so Dangan agus Cork-Raguena, but because of our well-paid jobs, they end up leaving, going to foreign shores, coming to Dublin. Numerous of my friends live and work in the cities of Ireland and the cities abroad due to the fact that we don't have the well-paid jobs in the Dingle Peninsula. I call on Congress here today to petition the government and petition policies into the future to look at the IDA to see what they can do, along with Enterprise Ireland and Dúdar Os na Gaeltachta, to help to promote and bring more well-paid jobs into the Dingle Peninsula and into Cork-Raguena and into all our rural areas, and not just to concentrate on our bigger towns and bigger cities. We need employment, we need well-paid jobs in rural areas of this country, and I call on the delegates here today to support my motion on pushing through that we petition the IDA to look more favourably on rural areas as well as the big urban centres for bringing foreign direct investment into our country and giving our youth a chance to live and work at home in their communities and continue our traditions. Like all our schools in Cork-Raguena are taught mainly through Oscailga. I know my friends would love to be living and working in their local community still. Again, I call on Congress to please support my motion to petition the IDA to look favourably on more rural areas, the likes of Cork-Raguena and every other Gaeltacht area in our country. Thanks very much, Congress, and I hope you support this motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Is there a seconder for motion 9? Great. John O'Dowd to formally second. So motion 10 in the name of the Navan Road and District Branch. I'll take a mover for motion 10. Eilish Balfe.
Good morning again. Comrades, as we gather here at our conference, it's so important we stand tall and proud in our defence of the rights of working people across this country. We are calling on Conference to support our calls for the party to embark on an unyielding and unflinching campaign for the introduction of essential workers' rights, guaranteeing that every worker in Ireland has the right to organise and negotiate collectively. Let us not underestimate the real power of the EU Directive on Adequate Minimum Wages, which demands transposition into Irish law by November 2024. This directive is once-in-a-generation opportunity to improve the rights of workers. It is a chance to expand collective bargaining coverage and boost the pay packets of the people we were founded to serve. The have-nots and the have-somes, we cannot let this slip through our fingers. By compelling Ireland to be better at collective bargaining, this directive presents a long-awaited catalyst for transformative change in Ireland's labour law landscape. And it's some of the worst labour laws in Western Europe. Comrades, we are asking you for this urgent mandate to confront head-on the inadequacies of our unfair dismissals legislations. Workers and union activists should not be subjected to the looming spectre of dismissal or victimisation. We demand substantial reforms to ensure fairness, justice and respect prevails at work. We need to abolish the draconian 12-month service period requirement for access and protections under the unfair dismissals legislation. It is time to align this with the health and safety legislation and the protected disclosures legislation to ensure workers are shielded from day one of their employment. Furthermore, we must advocate for legislation that guarantees a right to organise and for workers to access to trade unions. We must guarantee unions unrestricted access to the workplaces and workers, empowering them to organise and advocate effectively. Lastly, we must dismantle the stronghold of employers' veto power in collectively bargained sectorial employment agreements. We need legislation that ensures these agreements can proceed unimpeded, enabling workers to collectively shape fair terms and conditions. Comrades, as members of the Labour Party, of Connolly's party, we are duty-bound to be the vanguard in the fight for workers' rights. Let us forge a united front in our core mission for essential workers' rights, striving tirelessly to construct a society where fairness and justice reign supreme for all. I move this motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Eilish. Is there a seconder for motion 10? Owen Coates.
Morning, comrades. Owen Coates, Kildare North, speaking on behalf of Labour Trade Unionists. We're here to second this motion today. I think it's something extremely important, and as has been said, we are living in difficult times as trade unionists, as workers, and we must stand up. And Labour has never been afraid of standing up, so now we need to stand up. I want to bridge two motions that have already been discussed, one particular about retail workers and this one. Workers in the private sector, in particular in retail, which I have the honour of representing in my day job, are not only prevented but are actively blocked from joining unions. Personally, I have been kicked out of a store for being a trade union official, and there is nothing I can do to protect me or to protect the workers from such actions from occurring. Legislation is absolutely essential that we protect those activists in the field, protect those who are willing to stand up for their comrades, for the people around them, and to say enough is enough, we're not tolerating this. But most importantly, we must advocate for legislation guaranteeing that implicit right, as we mentioned, to organise, granting us as union activists and representatives unrestricted access to workplace and indeed to workers. Research has proven that collective bargaining is beneficial not only for workers but for society as a whole. We have a worryingly low rate of representation in this country, which has been proactively kept down by corporations supported by this government. This government has been actively ignoring our efforts to improve working rights, to improve legislation for workers, and that is completely unacceptable. And as a Labour Party, I think it's something, it's in our nature, it's in our blood, it's something we can stand for to make a just society that works for all. Thank you.
Thanks, Owen. So moving on to motion 11 in the name of the North Dock East Wall branch. I'll take a mover for motion 11. Hannah DC.
Thanks, Chair. Hannah DC, Drumcondra Glasnevin, proposing this Dublin Central motion. Conference, our party's name, Oscailga, is perhaps the most resonant slogan that we have ever had. An Lucht Ibra, the party, the community of work. As a party, we are rightly proud of our origins within the union movement and celebrate our traditions, heroes and heroines. But for the past to continue to be powerful, it must inform the future. As a party, we cannot let our relationship with the trade union movement be a thing of the past. Labour trade unionists and our parliamentary party work tirelessly to ensure that our legislative work and our campaigns reflect the action and activities of unions, not to mention the work of our activists, members and officials, all those among us who are proud union members. But we must go further. The union movement needs to grow, and the Labour Party needs to be part of that. Recent Red Sea research has shown that 44% of workers aged between 18 and 34 who are working but who are not union members are interested in joining a union and open to joining a union. The Better in a Trade Union campaign, recently launched, is an all-island campaign coordinated by the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. It seeks to reach out to that cohort and to all workers in Ireland to demonstrate the power of collective action and union membership. The centrepiece of that campaign will be Ireland's first ever Union Week. It will run from April 29th to May 3rd and will celebrate the diversity and strength of unions in Ireland. This motion calls on the party to support that campaign and be part of those events that week to ensure that Labour representatives are front and central at their local Union Week events, demonstrating the party's commitment to the union movement and saying proudly, it is not just something of the past, but very much part of our present and indeed our future. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. Is there a seconder for motion 11? A formal seconder, Ivana Craig. Thanks, Ivana. So motion 12 in the name of the Roscommon branch Greystones. Annie.
Dear Gwit, dear comrades, retirement is something we all experience in our lives, whether you are retired now or will be retired in the future. So it is a matter of concern for all of us. While we are working, when we have work back to our trade union, but 6 months after retirement, you have no access to the industrial relations as a grievance procedure. Retired people are then left to the arbitrary decision of the pension funds, which have no power behind them to balance their position on the negotiation table. We need those voices on the negotiation table. For example, Air Renata and Aer Lingus made an arbitrary decision in 2014 not to pay any pension increases or respect pay priority. In relation to the old pension scheme, when being taken over by the IAG, the industrial relationship process related in passing the debt of 175 million euros to existing pension schemes in 2015. This is actual cash taken out of our pensioners' income every month up to the age of 97. This is a serious injustice, and in order for us to challenge it, 4 trustees and the pension scheme took the matter to High Court, as this was only recourse open to them. They lost their case on a technicality and were bullied for over 1 million euros in cost. This bill is frightening and impossible for individuals on a pension pay. Despite having the Ombudsman for pensions, this remit is quite narrow under the Pension Act and can only deal with individual cases within the confines of the Act. The Irish Senior Citizen Parliament and the Alliance Group does it best to represent older people but has limitations and effectiveness. Consequently, pensioners' recourse is unjust, is to go to court, and the cost which is prohibitive. People who have worked for 40 years and more are rendered powerless to the decisions of the scheme, which have promised them certain income with parity on retirement. Therefore, as many unions have retired member groups, I ask to support this motion to change the law, especially the 1990 Industrial Relations Act, to include the right of unions to represent their retired members. This is a new challenge for the unions to ensure their workers' future income when retired. Retired people need union support where they can bring their grievances and negotiations to the table and Labour Court, ending the absence of the statutory grievances forum for retired workers. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Is there a seconder for motion 12? A formal seconder for motion 12? Duncan Smith. Thanks, Duncan. So motion 13 then in the name of Labour Trade Unionist mover for motion 13, Andrea Clear. And just to remind all speakers, just state their name and constituency when speaking.
Andrea Clear, Charlie Smith, Carlow Kilkenny constituency. Comrades, we must confront the stark reality of inequality and its corrosive effects in our society. We need to close the gap between the have-lots and the have-nots. Inequality not only undermines social cohesion, but also fuels political polarisation. It robs progressives of the franchise on hope and ultimately stunts economic growth. The current cost of living crisis has been exacerbated by an economy that prioritises extreme profits and greed over the well-being of workers and their wages, widening the gap in income and wealth inequality. At its core, this crisis stems from a structural imbalance of power and wealth distribution, perpetuating institutionalised class inequalities. We firmly believe that this cost of living crisis is, at its heart, a low-pay crisis. As a party, we must prioritise policies that urgently improve pay and foster a fairer economy, a transparent and progressive tax system that ensures the better off contribute more, a true labour economy. We are also acutely aware of the challenges posed by the rapid development and introduction of new digital technologies. Workers must acquire and adapt new skills to the evolving world of work and address potential challenges such as discrimination and equality driven by technologies like automation and AI. To tackle these crises head-on, we must strengthen trade union rights, empowering workers to engage in collective bargaining. Labour commits to supporting trade unions as the most effective vehicles for organising workers, for redistribution of wealth, for securing better jobs, better pay and better conditions. We demand that companies receiving government support and procurement contracts recognise trade union for collective bargaining rights with no exceptions. Crucially, we in the Labour Trade Unionists are calling on the party leadership to take seriously our previous calls to advocate for a new political consensus, a common left platform that prioritised taking back control of essential services and utilities through democratic public ownership. We call on fair pay ratios between CEOs and employees and an end to prioritising shareholder dividends over workers' wages. Additionally, we demand that employers consult with workers and their unions on new technologies and conduct equality impact assessment to understand their impacts and effects. Workers must have the right to retrain, including paid time off for retraining and union activities. So, delegates, let's reaffirm our commitment to building a fairer and more just society. I thank you for listening to this motion and I move there. Please support. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. A seconder for motion 13, Peter O'Brien.
Thanks, Chair. Peter O'Brien, Dundrum, Sean Fitzpatrick and Labour Trade Unionists. As we gather at this conference, we are confronting a rampant inequality and it's damaging our society in all walks of life. As Labour people, we know how inequality undermines social cohesion, fuels political polarisation and stunts economic growth. The current cost of living crisis has worsened due to an economy that prioritises extreme profit over workers' well-being and wages. This has widened the gap of income and wealth inequality, rooted in structural imbalance of power and wealth redistribution. The crisis is fundamentally a low-paid crisis. We in Labour must prioritise aimed at urgently providing pay and building a fairer economy, an Ireland that works for all. We advocate for a transparent and progressive taxation system that ensures the better off contribute more, a true Labour economy. We are also aware of the challenges that is posed by the rampant technological advances. Workers need new skills to adapt and address political challenges like discrimination and inequality that will be driven by automation and AI. To tackle the crisis, comrades, we must strengthen trade union rights, empowering workers to engage in collective bargaining, and Labour commits to supporting trade unions as the most effective vehicle for organising workers and securing better paid jobs and conditions. And what is crucial, we must demand that companies that receive government support through the procurement contracts must recognise trade unions for collective bargaining. And additionally, we advocate for a new political consensus, a common left platform that prioritises taking back control of essential services and utilities through democratic public ownership. Furthermore, Labour trade unions demand that employees consult with workers and their unions on new workplace technology and conduct equality impact assessment and understanding of their impact. Together, we in Labour can close the gap of income inequality and create a future where every worker is valued, but more importantly, comrades, where every worker is empowered.
Thanks, Peter. So moving on to motion 14 now in the name of the Whitehall Santry branch. Is there a mover for motion 14?
John Lonergan, Ballymun, Finglas, Dublin North West, our higher education spokesperson Annie Hoey will be seconding. Our motion concerns the skills shortages in our economy. If we continue to just base our skills shortages on the traditional university sector, we will surely continue our skills shortages in this sector. We need a proactive approach. We need everyone from care workers to engineers. This is not happening because the current laissez-faire approach, from everything from our society to our universities to the government. Technological universities have a huge role in stopping this skills shortages. However, they try to emulate the role of traditional university, especially TUD. This is surely down to the megalomaniac leadership of TUD. TUD has voted no confidence in its leadership team by 95%. Why should we have confidence in them? I ask confidence to support this motion. It calls on Labour to support the intervention into the TU sector to overcome this skills shortage that needs to. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. And you're a man after my own heart. You're well within time on speaking to that motion. So a seconder for motion 14. Lorna, are you looking to second it? Or Annie Hoey second motion 14? And, okay, so Annie Hoey to formally second motion 14 and then Lorna Fitzpatrick to speak to motion 15. Thanks, Lorna.
Thanks, Lisa. Sorry, eager beaver here, getting out ahead. Good morning, conference. Lorna Fitzpatrick, local election candidate for the Gorey district in Wexford constituency, moving this motion on behalf of Central Council. This is a motion that impacts the future of workers' rights and will transform workers' rights in Ireland. The motion revolves around the transposition of the EU directive on adequate minimum wages and the imperative need to enhance collective bargaining. As already discussed this morning, this government must transpose the directive by the end of November 2024. The clock is ticking. There must be action. We cannot wait and we cannot delay. The directive's emphasis on promoting collective bargaining and workers' ability to join and organise within a union underscores the interconnectedness of these rights. Collective bargaining and the freedom to organise are not just ideals. They are essential pillars of a fair and just society. Therefore, this motion calls upon the Minister for Trade, Enterprise and Employment to prioritise working with our trade unions to deliver a strong transposition that puts workers at the centre, prioritising their rights and protections for workers across all sectors. We fully endorse the position taken by ICTU and applaud the tireless efforts of the trade union movement through initiatives like the Right to Organise campaign. The statistics from recent UCD research highlights the desire for union representation among workers, particularly among young workers, further emphasising the relevance and the urgency of our discussions today. Central to this motion are key elements that must be included in the transposition of the EU directive. Firstly, a ban on union busting. We must unequivocally prohibit any attempts by employers to undermine union activities or intimidate workers exercising their rights. Ensuring enhanced protections for union members, making sure there are stronger legal protections and safeguards in place. Providing facilities for union representatives, making sure that union reps have the necessary tools and supports from their employers to complete their duties. Ensuring unions have unimpeded access to engage with and recruit workers within their workplace. And finally, making sure that union recognition and collective bargaining are viewed as positive attributes, integrated into public tendering processes and linked to the provision of public funds to support companies. In conclusion, the successful transposition of this EU directive, coupled with robust measures to enhance collective bargaining rights, will benefit workers and contribute to a more equitable and prosperous society. The Labour Party has a proud history of fighting for workers' rights. Labour trade unionists, our PLP and our party want to make sure that our country's future is one where every worker's rights are protected, respected and celebrated. Gur míle maith of conference.
Thanks, Lorna. Is there a seconder for motion 15? Marie Sherlock, formally second motion 15. So we've dealt with each of the motions under the section on work, so we'll open it now to common debate. If there's any speakers who would like to speak to any of the motions that we've covered, there's 2 minutes to each speaker. So first we have Mike O'Connor looking to speak. And if you could just name, constituency and the motion you're speaking to.
Yes, thank you. Mike O'Connor, Clondalkin Racool Branch, Dublin Midwest, and I'm speaking in support of motion 12 in the name of the Greystones branch. I speak as a trustee of a pension scheme, and I also speak as a retired trade union activist. I think this motion is really important in that trade unions can represent activists because they're still in work. They can represent some deferred members of a scheme depending on where they work. But when it comes to pensioners, it's a very different story. And therefore, I think this motion hits the nail on the head when it comes to representing pensioners who have worked all their lives, who may be members of a defined benefit scheme and who have been given indications or promises that they would be getting a certain level of pension when they retire. If the number of activists in a closed defined benefit scheme ceases, well then you're left with possible deferreds and pensioners. So who can represent those people? They really are on their own, and the courts are the only resort at the moment. And, you know, in the coming weeks, there will be some court cases coming up, which maybe the person who proposed this motion might keep an eye on. But I'm just here to support this motion. I think it's very good, and I would recommend it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any other speakers to the motions? Brian McDowell.
I better put the glasses on. There was a day I didn't need them. Brian McDowell, Donaghmede Branch, Dublin Bay North. Before I start, can I first congratulate Billy, Aideen, Cahill and all the staff for all the work done to put on the conference. The agenda makes, I think, people would agree, for a couple of great days of debate and discussion, which is what conference is all about. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak, I hope, probably on two motions, supporting motion 10 and motion 15 from Central Council. The EU Directive on Adequate Minimum Wages requires the Government to produce an action plan to significantly increase collective bargaining coverage. by first promoting collective bargaining and by making it easier for workers to join and organise their union. Promoting collective bargaining and making it easier for them to join their union, because Ireland has the weakest workers' rights in Western Europe. Let me just say that again. Ireland has the weakest workers' rights in Western Europe. Big business and our lobby group IBEC wanted to stay that way. We, the Labour Party, have to make it clear that things are going to change. By passing these motions, we send a clear message to big business, to IBEC, and to all those who want to minimise the rights of workers, that the Labour Party, as always done, will stand shoulder to shoulder with our trade union colleagues and with workers. Our campaign must demand respect for the voice of workers. It must demand respect for the right of an employee to organise a union in their workplace without fear of victimisation. It must demand respect for the voice of a worker who wants their trade union to act on their behalf in negotiations with their employer. We need a ban on union busting by bad employers. We need stronger protections for union members so workers cannot be victimised, isolated, discriminated against or dismissed for their union activity. We need rights that ensure people can join together with their workmates to negotiate fair pay. We need a worker-centric transposition of the EU Directive on adequate minimum wages. Colleagues, we are the party of the trade union movement. We need to support the movement in this battle for the rights of workers. I commend the Navan Road and District Branch and Central Council for proposing these motions and urge all colleagues to support them. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to call our party spokesperson on workers' rights, Marie Sherlock, Senator Marie Sherlock, to respond to the debate.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Chair, and comrades, Colachti, Buil Party on Loch Dibra, Tá sé go hintach con grúpa mór a gáil sa cógáil seo agus bhrálam buíchas a gáil de gachtainna a bhiltaíonn na rún os ar góir amadan seo. Conference, I'm delighted to see a great turnout this morning, and I want to sincerely thank all of those who submitted and spoke on motions here today. I also want to acknowledge, and it's important to say that I see Princess Rossa, Janice Sullivan, Robert Dowds, and indeed there are probably other former representatives for the Labour Party here in the audience. There's also, of course, our councillors, our candidates, and most importantly, our members who are the backbone of our party. So delighted to see you all here today. For us in the Labour Party, these motions on work go to the heart of what we are about. Work is a means for people to provide for themselves, to provide for their families, to live a life with dignity and a sense of self-worth. And for as long as there is an inequality of power in our workplaces, an inequality of access to what should be basic, decent public services in our health system, in our education system, and as long as there's an inability of many people in this country to put an affordable, decent roof over their heads, then our job as a Labour Party remains as important as ever. Right now, there's a lot of frustration in this country, and understandably so. Even a salary of €100,000 with savings of €40,000 in the bank is not enough to get a mortgage for a 3-bed house across most of Dublin. In fact, 2/3 of all Dublin postcodes, you would not be able to buy a house on that money. So if that is the case for those who've done well, if that is the case for those who've got a really good salary, what hope do our young people have? What hope does anybody on low pay or those paying a massive childcare costs and now having to go out and look for a mortgage? Comrades, colleagues, I believe the Rubicon has been crossed in this country. This current government, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and indeed the Greens, want to believe that by giving us crumbs that things are okay, that by giving us basic rights like sick pay or auto-enrolment pension or the small subsidy to help with exorbitant childcare costs, that we will be placated. Well, I'll tell you, we are not. Make no mistake, we know what side this government is on. When we wanted to ensure access to flexible and remote work from day one for every worker in this country, we were told no way. And the meagre rights that this government did legislate for, well, they dragged their heels for a whole year. All because of the thousands of square feet of office space lying empty across this city and indeed many other urban areas in this country. Dublin has an office vacancy rate of 17%. So even though a right to flexible work would bring thousands more people into the workplace, the government shot themselves in the foot, all because of employer pressure. When RTDs brought our miscarriage and fertility leave bill into the Dáil, after it passed all stages in the Seanad, the government said no, you've had enough. When the Supreme Court made its groundbreaking judgment last autumn that Domino's pizza drivers were in fact employees, that they were actually bogusly self-employed, what has the government done since then? It has sat on its hands, and worse, it's failed to tell RTE to cop on and get rid of its bogus self-employment as an ongoing issue. And I say that as someone who's passionate about RTE and wants to see it survive. And when we highlighted that apprentices actually need to be paid the national minimum wage, we got a commitment all right, but we've got no action. All because employers balked. And finally, when the EU directive on adequate minimum wages that has been spoken about so many times here this morning, when that was put before government, this directive that is intended to support the right to organise and to expand collective bargaining coverage in this country, what happened? The government turned around and said, there's no legislative changes needed here. Our legislation is quite all right. Thanks very much. The fundamental reality is that there is a great imbalance of power in workplaces across this country, and this government sees no problem with it. I think we all need to reflect when we see cases of gross exploitation of a migrant chef. Just before Christmas we saw here, and just before €6 an hour, worked 50 to 60 hours per week and could only be awarded a sum of just over €1,500 for the underpayment of wages. Or the sacked Chinese takeaway driver who sought a rise from his €5 per hour pay. He got only €1,500 for his unfair dismissal. Or that there are no laws surrounding non-disclosure agreements in this country, which means employers can buy silence on their egregious practices. Trade unions tell us that there are hundreds of shop stewards sacked each year for trying to organise workers in their workplaces, but we never hear of them, because employers buy them off, they pay them off with regards to an unfair dismissal claim. We need to see a profound change to our unfair dismissals laws in this country, to send a message to employers that bad behaviour will not be tolerated. Because to be honest, if we don't make those changes, then we have no hope of turning the tide on workplaces hostile to union organising, and there are many out there. If workers can't organise, if they can't unionise, then they can't collectively bargain, and then they don't stand a chance of forging a fair workplace for themselves. We know we won't change, we won't narrow, we won't eliminate the gender pay gap in this country unless women can come together and collectively bargain for themselves. We know that low pay and the exploitation of migrant labour in this country will continue unless there is a union there to push back. And we know that good employers already know this. But there are far too many hostile employers out there willing to turn their noses to what is right, to ensuring a union in their workplace, and we need to change that. And the critical point to also add is that in shifting the balance of power within our workplaces, this isn't just about legislation, this isn't about employers, it's about the government too. The state spends €18 billion each year in procuring goods and services, and yet successive governments have chosen not to use that budget to ensure decent wages, decent working conditions for those supplying those goods and services. That needs to change. I want to talk to one specific motion this morning, Motion 8, and we've had fantastic motions, and I wholeheartedly support them all. But I want to touch on just Motion 8, which calls on us to draft legislation to ensure that attacks on retail hospitality and public health workers, that those attacks are made a specific criminal offence. And this is so necessary. It's no accident that in these particular sectors, these front-facing sectors that engage with clients, customers, patients every day, that there's high levels of migrant labour in these sectors. Migrant workers, of course, are not the only source of attacks in these sectors, but they are especially vulnerable. And comrades, we know that racism and xenophobia is growing within our workplaces, and we have to push back. Some of that is manifesting because of a growing sense of frustration, a growing sense of powerlessness in the workplace, in people's communities, not being able to get the basic services that they need. Any of us in our communities, who are out and about in our communities, know that a lack of power, that a lack of powerlessness can be very potent. It can be exploited, it can be pushed into very insidious places. And by God, we have seen that over the past 12 months. But it can also be harnessed as a force for good. And that is the great challenge facing our workplaces, our political system at this present time. There is a threat out there by those who have no interest in advancing the rights of workers, but they are all too readily available to exploit the sense of grievance amongst workers, and we must push back. The best bulwark against this sense of powerlessness, against the exploitation of powerlessness, is to give workers a greater sense of power and being able to shape their incomes, their progression, and their own destiny. That means power in our local democracy, that means power within our workplaces, and power at central government. I want to finish by saying that I think we live in both daunting and exciting times. I'm very excited by what technology and artificial intelligence can do to help us within our work, but I'm also terrified about what it can do when it's in the wrong hands. It is revolutionising how workers are recruited, how they are paid, and how they are assessed. We in the Labour Party have drafted legislation to try and put in place protections for workers with regards to algorithms and how they manage workers. We have the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, but it does not go far enough. And this government has chosen to sit on its hands and stand back and let companies decide how artificial intelligence will be rolled out across our workplaces. And we have to say no. We want Ireland to follow the likes of Spain and set out an artificial intelligence supervisory council so that we protect workers first and foremost. Comrades, fellow members, conference, work is at the heart of what we do as a party. And the work that I'm doing and my colleagues are doing day in, day out is to try and represent the work of the lowest paid, but also all workers. And we need to ensure that these motions inform what we do over the next year, but also, as a conference, support the trade union movement in their really important campaign to ensure that all workers come on board and unionise and get involved over the next 12 months, because there is a unique opportunity now in our country to ensure that workers can have a fair shot at having a fair say within their workplaces. But we need to put pressure on government. We too as a party need to step up and call out workers who don't join trade unions and say why not, because it's in their individual interest, but it's in the interest of all workers that we make sure that they're members of trade unions in this country. I want to thank again all those who have put forward motions this morning, and I commend all these motions to Conference Garmagat.
Thanks, Marie, for your response to each of the motions under the section on work. So now I'm going to put each of the motions to the floor for a vote. So again, just using delicate cards in order to cast your vote. I'm going to move to motion 8, which was put forward by the UCC Labour branch. Those in favour of motion 8? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 8 is carried. Motion 9, then, in the name of the Tralee Rock Street branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion number 9 is carried. Motion 10, then, in the name of the Navan Road and District branch. Those in favour of motion 10? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 10 is carried. Motion 11, then, in the name of the North Dock East Wall branch. Those in favour of motion 11? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 11 is carried. Motion 12 then in the name of the Ross Connolly branch Greystones. Those in favour of motion 12? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 12 is carried. Motion 13 then in the name of Labour Trade Unionists. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 13 is carried. Motion 14 then in the name of the Whitehall Santry branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Thank you. Motion 14 is carried. And then motion 15 in the name of Central Council. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 15 is carried. So that concludes plenary session. So I just want to thank our party spokespersons, so to Senator Rebecca Moynihan, to Deputy Duncan Smith and to Senator Marie Sherlock for responding to each of the debate. So we're going to move immediately into plenary session 2, where we're going to deal with local government and housing. So I'm going to ask both party spokespersons to come up on stage in order to be able to deal with both those sections. So I'm going to ask for Senator Mark Wall and Deputy Ivana Bacik to come up, and thanks again to our party spokespersons on climate, transport and work. So under plenary session 2, this is the section of conference that we're going to be on live TV. We're going to be on RTE from I think 12 p.m. till 1 p.m. and the order under our agenda is to deal with local government and then followed by housing. But what I'm going to put to conference floor to ask if it's feasible to just rotate the order, so to move housing, to deal with the issue of housing in the first instance, and then we'll follow that by local government. So can I, in order to move that proposal, could I get someone to propose that? Councillor Brian McDonough. And a seconder? John Thomas Phelan. Thanks, Thomas. Is that accepted by conference? Can I just get a show of hands to just rotate the order to deal with housing in the first instance? Any objections to that? Great, thanks comrades. So we're just going to deal then in the first instance with housing. So to move to the first motion in relation to housing, it's motion 16, which is being put forward by the Pembroke Tom Johnson branch, Dublin Bay South, and it's a composite motion with Dublin Bay North included. So I'll ask for a mover for motion 16, Dermot Lacey.
Good morning, conference. When I heard Dermot Lacey, Tom Johnson, Pembroke branch, when I heard party leader refer to Emma Stagg this morning, I couldn't help but reflect on how much Ireland needs the sort of energy and commitment and dedication that Emmett brought to his role as Housing Minister, and I think he really will be missed as a solid member of this party. There is a small street in my estate called Beach Hill Terrace. The street is about 3/4 the length of a football field. And on that street, if you stand in the middle of it, you will see 5 new Dublin City Council houses, 9 new houses built by a co-op, and 19 houses built by an approved housing body. In all cases, those projects were Labour-led, and we delivered on a small site in the middle of Dublin 4. There's also 8 private houses that you can see from that street, built inside gardens. So there are solutions to the housing crisis. The problem is there is no real serious effort at government level to deliver on housing. And I ask you to support this motion and all of the motions in relation to housing, because resolving the housing crisis requires a lot of things to happen and a lot of different deliveries. It's like a jigsaw, and we need all of them to happen together. Former party leader once said that a particular issue was the civil rights issue of his generation. I actually didn't agree with him at the time, and I still don't. Housing, for me, is the civil rights issue of this generation. The right of ordinary people to have a home, the right for young people to have a place to live, independent lives, and to live a better life for the future. And if this party is about anything, it has to be about the delivery of social, affordable, cost rental, and all the other ingredients to the housing crisis that will deliver to it. I want to just add one point of perhaps some controversy. The Labour Party has always been prepared to take on vested interests. We've taken on the banks, we've taken on the developers, we've taken on the rezoners. But there is one part of the housing debate that has never been challenged, and that's the institutional inertia of the Department of Housing and Local Government. We cannot deliver housing in this country unless we challenge that. At their very heart, they are antagonistic to the delivery of new housing innovations, and they are deeply hostile to local government. We as a party have to challenge that, because it actually doesn't matter who the temporary minister is unless we challenge the permanent government in the Customs House, who I believe have done so much damage to this country that we need to take them on. I urge you to support all the motions. Let Labour be the party of housing again. We delivered before under successive ministers. We can do it again. I urge your support. Thank you.
Thanks, Dermot. Is there a seconder for motion 16? Is there someone to formally second Councillor John Pratt? Thanks, John. So motion 17 then, in the name of the Athy branch, Councillor Aoife Breslin.
Comrades, Aoife Breslin, Athy branch, Kildare South. I wish to propose a motion that Conference calls on Government to initiate a large-scale local authority housing building programme on council land, acknowledging the overdependence of this current government on the private market to provide any housing solutions in this housing crisis. Housing is a basic human right. All of us know that we are in a housing emergency with record numbers of homelessness. The figures are disturbing and shocking, increasing at an alarming rate, and yet the government have done nothing productive to stop or address this problem. There are children in Ireland who have never had a place to call home. They are often living in emergency accommodation, having to move on a continuous basis. We are all aware of the impact of emergency accommodation is having on our people. These children and their families have been failed by this government. There has been an undersupply of social housing for decades, and we have relied on the private sector to supply housing. All of us know that in our clinics on a daily, hourly basis, we meet people who are facing homelessness, who have been on the housing list for many, many years, and there's no chance of them getting accommodated. In my own council, in Kildare County Council, families with a two-bed housing need, can be waiting up to 14 years to be housed. Waiting times for persons with a one-bed need is even longer. Not alone has the government failed to equip local authorities with the means of building housing local authority units, we are also grappling with resources for vacant stock. Local authorities must be resourced properly to reduce the length of time it takes to return vacant units back into stock. This month, Kildare County Council has 154 vacant units requiring remedial work. One of the solutions is to properly resource local authorities to instigate a housing programme on council land. However, the obstacle is that local authorities do not have land or access or resources to get land. This needs to be addressed, not in a piecemeal manner, which is happening at the moment. We need an actively increase the stock of public-owned lands available to our local authorities. Local authorities have to be given the tools immediately to re-enter into the housing market as the major player. We need to build a strong, sustainable housing system and deliver secure, affordable homes for our citizens. I think it's very appropriate this week, and particularly in the last couple of days, as we said goodbye to our comrade Emmett Stagg. When Emmett was made Minister of State at the Department of Environment, the first thing he did was to increase the level of homes being delivered from 800 units a year to 10,000. Comrades, the Labour Party can deliver, and we have a proven record on the delivery of homes for all. Councillors, comrades, I urge you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Aoife. Is there a seconder for motion 17? Sean, would you like to speak to motion 17? So Sean O'Hurgan to formally second motion 17. Comrades, because motion 16 was a composite motion, I do want to give the opportunity for somebody from Dublin Bay North to speak from the podium to the motion 16 on the basis of Councillor Dermot Lacey spoke on behalf of Dublin Bay South. I'd like to call on Ali Field from Dublin Bay North to speak to motion 16.
Good morning all, I'm Alison Field and I'm from Dublin Bay North. Firstly, I'd just like to say that the week that's in it, I've Anna for Taoiseach. Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Housing motion. Conference recognises the campaign to end dereliction vacancy across the country and bring buildings back to productive residential use. Conference also recognises the key role in local authorities can play in identifying vacant and derelict buildings. And also maybe they should look at lane areas the option to give families to buy the lane areas beside their house with a possibility of building so that they could live in there and their children could live in the house. Conference therefore calls for an increase in staffing funding to allow local authorities to work more effectively on this issue. Please support this motion.
So we're moving now to motion 18 in the name of the Wicklow constituency. So a speaker for motion 18, Annie.
Dear Gwit, my name is Annie Wedera Burke and I am from Greystones Municipal District running the Wicklow constituency. Friends, comrades, and all present here today know someone badly affected by the housing crisis in this country. It is totally wounding and harmful, and the effects on this country is shameful and very much unacceptable. The chronic lengthy housing lists, overcrowded housing, and cost of rent and housing is spiraling out of control, and it is crippling to our society, where we have adults living in the childhood bedrooms with their families, and families who would have never thought of it, worried about being evicted and becoming homeless. This can never continue. Friends, delegates, you will have heard about my hometown Greystones over the last week, given that I share a hometown with Deputy Simon Harris. Many people in Greystones and County Wicklow have struggled with the housing. My colleague, who I absolutely admire, Councillor Paul O'Brien, has worked tirelessly in Wicklow County Council to create cost rental housing schemes such as Archers Wood, that is near where I live. And this is needed, and much more of it. I note the cost rental scheme does not give the priority to disabled people, and this definitely has to change. Labour has a clear vision for housing, a clear vision for the future. Friends, as we meet here today, at this weekend, let us be very clear on one thing. Labour has always delivered on housing. Labour has always kept its promise on housing. The contribution of former Labour Housing Minister from Wicklow, Liam Kavanagh, and Liz McManus, and not forgetting Emmett Stagg, have been absolutely enormous. We need to continue Labour's trajectory and build homes that work for all. Delegates, this motion calls for a range of active solutions on housing, including more affordable housing, and calls for the councils across Ireland to place a compulsory purchase order on land banks, and I ask that you strongly support this motion. Groom Haggett.
Thanks, Annie. Is there a seconder for motion 18? Formal seconder? Emma Cutlip Gallagher. So moving then to motion 19 in the name of the Donamead branch. Shane Folan.
Shane Folan, Donamead. Gurmia Malgwiv, Adina Ushla.
This government are not serious about housing. We know this from record homelessness, an entire generation, my generation, locked out of housing, condemned to rent for a lifetime with little to no protections if they can even afford the rent in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, this government treat the people of Ireland from all walks of life as a piece of data on a spreadsheet. And that is true, especially when it comes to housing. They talk about housing as if it was a KPI for the private investors that they insist on using and private developers that they insist on using to build these houses instead of the local authorities that should be leading on it. They don't seem to understand that we need to build not just houses, but homes. We have to build communities alongside the units that we put up. And we know from experience in this country and in this city and on this side of the city in particular, on the north side, what can happen when you just throw up housing units and then abandon a whole community behind it. You're just you're solving one problem by creating another down the line. A new community needs a place to meet up, to share together, to grow together, young and old. And if we're to be certain of success and cohesion across the spectrum, we need community spaces in all planning applications. If this doesn't happen, we will only be creating one problem to solve another, as I've already said. Indoor spaces are the lifeblood of any community, and the department needs to fund them if we're to have any chance of creating these cohesive communities together for the next generation to grow up in. The government have the power to do this tomorrow if they want, but the only way that we can be sure of this is happening is with Labour in government. Because when Labour leads, change follows. We need a general election now, and instead of a government ruling and hiding, we need Labour in there. Only a Labour government will build sustainable communities where Dublin and Ireland can be a place to grow up and grow old in. Thank you very much. I'd urge you to vote in favour of the motion.
Thanks, Shane. Is there a seconder for motion 19? Anyone to formally second motion 19? Senator Annie Hoey. Thanks, Annie. So just to welcome those who are tuning in to RT, we're live now on the RT News channel, just to welcome everyone to the debate that we're having currently on housing at the Labour Party conference, where we're currently dealing with a wide range of motions. So we're moving on to motion 20 from the Donegal branch. So Michael McLaughlin.
Good afternoon. Michael McLaughlin, Letterkenny branch, Donegal. Acharja, tá luthar arm a bhein seo agus lóirt son muintir Tirchonal. Tá má cinse go bhfuil si bheith sásta seaasú le na Connolly a bhfuil a déalal le na faibaní na chuid tithe de réir Maica, Pyrite agus Pyrotite. Gan doubt, tá muid a ligan seo Lucht an farti lucht obre. Ag lorg cochrum na féime da lucht Tirchonal, Honde wio, Honde an Clar, agus Honde limni. Friends, I am glad to be here to highlight the plight of the people of Donegal, Mayo, Limerick and Clare, who are living through the defective concrete crisis. Conference, on June 15th, 2021, Dáil Éireann passed a motion for 100% redress unopposed, and yet we have not seen this delivered. The current scheme leaves families with even the most modest of houses with shortfalls of tens of thousands of euros. Conference, this week I had a hospital appointment, and the nurse told me it was a great day. The house she and her husband had built for their family was being knocked down. It was a good day because she had found somewhere for her, her husband, and 2 small children to rent. Conference, she has to pay €1,000 a month plus her mortgage. Conference, that is not fair. She told me it was a good day because she could afford it. There are thousands of others who can't afford to rent and pay mortgages while they wait for their replacement houses to be built. Conference, this is neither fair nor equal. Conference, I had a call from a group of people last night who were very worried. They live in local authority housing that is crumbling around them. Conference, no one is even talking to them about their homes. Conference, I am asking you to support this motion for us in the Labour Party to stand in solidarity with all people affected by the defective blocks crisis, and to call on this government to immediately provide the end-to-end support needed by the people of Donegal and other counties. In the name of fairness and equality, comrades, I commend this motion to you.
Thanks, Michael. Is there a seconder for motion 20? To formally second motion 20? Peter Horgan. Thanks, Peter. So moving to motion 21 now in the name of Dublin Bay South, Councillor Fiona Connolly.
Delegates, conference, I'm here, my name is Fiona Connolly. I'm here from Rathmines, Rathgar House Cross branch and the local councillor for the Kimmage Rathmines area. Last year, I stood before you as a member of the Labour Party, and this year I stand before you as a local councillor after being co-opted in place of Councillor Mary Freehill. So I'm here to propose motion 21, a pivotal motion that underscores the very essence of our Labour Party's ethos, the recognition that housing is not merely a commodity, but an inalienable human right. As we gather here, we cannot turn a blind eye to the stark reality of the inequality that continues to plague our society. It's the number one issue that people raise on the doors. It's the number one issue that I receive in heartbreaking emails, and it's the number one issue in my school staff room. Motion 21 reaffirms our commitment to rectify this injustice. We assert that it is our duty, the duty of the state, to play a central role in ensuring access to housing for all. Our policy is clear. We prioritise the construction of public housing on public land, guaranteeing stability and affordability for our citizens. To achieve this ambitious goal, we propose the adoption of a radical labour housing programme. Over the next decade, we aim to deliver 1 million homes, a monumental endeavour that demands innovation and determination. Our programme would consist of two core strategies, both the building of 50,000 new homes per year, which exceeds the government's current target of 30,000 homes per year, and also deep retrofitting and refurbishment of our existing dwellings. To facilitate this programme, we advocate for the establishment of a state construction company under the Land Development Agency, spearheading efficiency and accountability in every project. We recognise the need for skilled labour. We propose a proactive national recruitment plan to attract building workers from abroad. Additionally, we will increase pay rates for apprentice programmes, ensuring quality employment, incentivising construction training for our youth. Embracing modern construction methods such as off-site construction will expedite the delivery of housing without compromising on quality. Simultaneously, we will launch a comprehensive initiative to address vacancy and dereliction, revitalising communities across the nation. Yesterday I was chatting to my postman. My postman echoes the urgency of this because he reported that he delivers to 400 homes each day, and on his route where I live, he estimated there was about 30 vacant homes. And this is in an area where it's a populated area, it's a nice area, it doesn't have any standout symptoms of vacancy where I live. But if that's the level of vacancy on this micro level, we can definitely upscale this and improve it and make a big difference on a national level. Furthermore, we advocate for radical reform of planning laws, implementing a use it or lose it policy to deter speculative developers from hoarding inactive permissions, Additionally, we commit to implementing the recommendations of the Kenny Report, ensuring transparency and fairness in our housing policies. Motion 21 embodies our unwavering commitment to social justice and equality. Together, let us embark on this journey towards a future where every individual has a place to call home, not as a commodity, but as a fundamental human right. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Is there a seconder to motion 21? Councillor John Moore formally seconding motion 21. So moving to motion 22, then in the name of the Dún Laoghaire constituency, James Carney to move motion 22.
Jeev, comrades, James Carney, Killiney Shankill branch. Comrades, at our event last night, hosted by our comrades in the S&D group for our MEP candidates, Eoin Reardon and Niamh Horrigan, we spoke quite frankly about all things wrong with housing in this country. But perhaps the biggest thing, to me anyway, that came up consistently was that issue of security and insecurity. As a renter myself, I know the worry about whether or not I'll get a letter in the door from my landlord telling me and my partner to pack up. We're even nervous to ask about certain repairs, even though that's our job, so much as being a landlord can be considered a job. But we are a couple in our late 20s, early 30s. We're somewhat financially stable. We can rent for some time. But what about those who are insecure? What about those who are on low pay? What about people renting in their 40s, 50s, and even 60s? Where is their security? What happens to them when they have to rely on a meagre state pension to pay rents averaging above $1,600 nationwide and above $2,300 here in Dublin? Are we facing a future where pensioners will be evicted because they didn't save enough or because they weren't able to afford eye-watering house prices? We know ourselves that we can forge a different future for this, and we can start right now by reinstating the eviction ban. And we can go even further by holding the government to account and pass our Labour Renters' Rights Bill. Referring back to last night's event as well, we know the answer is not the market. The market may provide luxury items or designer brands, but it cannot and will not provide for basic necessities such as housing. This motion here mentions the importance of various social housing bodies, but also cooperative bodies, entities which seek to operate outside the free market and work with communities building in areas which they know best. At this point, I'd like to pay tribute to my esteemed comrade, Councillor Dennis O'Callaghan, who fought tooth and nail for the cooperative housing development of Loughtonstown Villas, which was instigated by local campaigner Rowena Kelly. This was one of the first cooperative housing initiatives in the state. It can be done, we just need the political will to do so. I'd also like to mention at this stage that now Fianna Fáil TD Cormac Devlin and now Fine Gael Senator Barry Ward tried to delay and cancel this development. Free marketeers trying to prevent social housing because it was ideologically inconvenient for them. Solving our housing crisis has to be through social democratic and socialist policies. The market cannot provide, so the state and the workers must. Gurmal give, I guess, up the workers. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Is there a seconder for motion 22? Kerry Smith formally seconding motion 22. So moving then to motion 23 in the name of Santry Kilmore branch, a mover for motion 23. Ali? Is there a mover for motion 23? So we'll come back to motion 23 at the end of the debate, moving then to motion 24 in the name of the Shelburne branch. Carol Reynolds.
My name is Carol Reynolds. I'm a member of the Shelburne branch and a candidate in the South East Inner City in Dublin. Conference, comrades and friends, we all want the same thing. A place called home. It's simple, a place called home. The option to live near our families, with friends, and participate in community, and go ahead about our lives in a safe and friendly and green environment. Wings End is where I call home. Over the years, I have seen more and more people pushed into homelessness in the southeast inner city. With each year that passes, less and less social and affordable housing is available. In many parts of Dublin, there are 3 generations living under one roof: the grandparents, the parents, and their children. What makes it worse is that we have solutions on our doorstep. The Irish Glass Bottle site has space for 3,500 units, and we have agreements in place for 900 units to be affordable and social housing. It is supported by Dublin City Councillors and on board Pleanála. In 2019, Dublin City Council and NAMA reached an agreement that would have secured the IGB lands for affordable homes at a discount of approximately 60% cost market. Despite this agreement, the Housing Department, Planning and Local Government stood in our way, and the Minister for Housing, Owen Murphy, then at the time a public representative in Dublin Bay South, refused to provide the finance required to purchase the land. This was a slap in the face. A slap in the face for the people of Ringsend, Irishtown, and surrounding communities. It's obvious to me that this government don't want to deliver the 900 social and affordable homes. It is also obvious to me that this government don't understand the word affordable. Setting the price at a percentage of the crazy market rates today. Let us point out to Darragh O'Brien, Minister, you have one hell of a fight on your hands. The IGB Action Group and the local communities will not stand down, and this Labour Party fully support them in achieving their goal. It's time to end excuses, ministers. It's time to end. We want solutions. I am calling on this government to commit to funding these homes once and for all, and to remove the uncertainty that floats around our communities today. I commend this motion to the conference.
Nessa Cosgrave.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Nessa Cosgrove. I'm from Sligo. I'm running in the Sligo Strandhill election, and I'm from the Sligo Leitrim constituency. Just like the previous speaker have said, the government love to spin on the numbers that they have around building social and affordable homes, but the facts speak for themselves. Record homelessness is, in a country awash with money, is still growing, and rents are still soaring. You know, in fairness, in Sligo County Council, there has been some strides being made around building of social homes, but shockingly and embarrassingly, 8.4 million of public money was handed over to private developers for building for homes in Sligo last year. This government is out of time, it's out of ideas, it's out of any kind of, I suppose, thinking outside the box when it comes to delivering homes that are based in communities and community-led for our residents in this country. We could and we need to move away from this mentality of viewing public housing as a commodity or something, a provision of houses for the poor or for the less well-off. Why can't we think outside the box? Why can't we move to a model seen in other European countries, such as Denmark, where housing provision changes with your needs, a cradle-to-the-grave approach, where when you get older, that you can downsize, and when you're younger, that you actually can move up as your family grows. We see all over the country that older people are struggling to heat their homes, while younger families are rammed into 1 or 2 bedroom apartments. Like we know ourselves, I suppose, we all know that when you've got no home, or when you've got adequate housing, that you've got no control, you feel like you've no control over your life. You've no options, you've no choices, your choices are completely limited. And this is how people get discontented and people get frustrated and fed up, I suppose. But why can't we as a party, and I think we can as a party, because we've a proven track record of building houses and building very, very strong social and affordable homes. But why can't we as a party build it in a community and residential approach to work which will grow social cohesion and social peace? We can work with architects, like they do again in other countries, that it's community and residential led, working with architects, working with planners, working with quantity surveyors. So ensuring that it's from the grassroots up and that communities are built around housing, that it's not just plonking housing estates here, housing estates there, that whole communities are built around it. And that it's built in adapted as we grow, as our needs grow, as people's needs grow, that houses are going to be adapted and built around that. So let's do things differently. So we're calling on conference to commit to a programme of home and community building based upon the twin values of affordability and sustainability in line with other European models. Garmagath.
Thanks, Nessa. Is there a seconder for motion 25? Owen Barry, formally seconding motion 25. So the final motion then under the section on housing is motion 26 in the name of Central Council. Is there a mover to speak to motion 26? So I don't see anyone offering at the minute. Councillor Dermot Lacey formally moving, proposing motion 26. Is there a formal seconder for motion 26? Senator Annie Hoey. So now I'm going to move to common debate to deal with motions 16 to motion 26. So I'll call on any speaker indicating to speak on any of the motions. So I'll take Councillor Declan Mina first, and if somebody could just assist Declan up to the podium, and if each speaker could identify which motion they're looking to speak on, that would be great.
Comrades and friends, Councillor Declan Mina, Cabra and District Branch. On motion 21, it is so important that we use modern methods of construction. This is not only to build warmer, more sustainable homes, but also to limit the carbon impact of construction waste. If we prefabricate homes, we can eliminate construction waste and eliminate the associated carbon footprint. In terms of planning, use it or lose it. Unfortunately, when we as councillors see that planning is approved, we have visions of families living in secure homes. When developers see that planning permission is improved, they have visions of the dollar signs on the one-armed bandit, and all they think of is profit. We have to stop this, and things that are planned should be built, and things that are approved should be appropriate. In terms of motion 22, just this week, I've had some of the most harrowing emails on awful situations where care leavers and children with disabilities are facing housing difficulties and homelessness. It is really not good enough that people are even people who are 6 months to a year away from social housing are being made homeless. So I urge you to support these two motions. Thank you.
Are speakers looking to speak on any of the motions to the floor? Michael Kennedy.
Mike Kennedy. I just wanted to show my support to the motion from the Sligo branch. It rings true right across the country. This government, Fianna Fáil, they have a housing policy for all, homes for all or something like that. It's homes for no one at all. We see in Dingle, in the last year alone, we've had 133 social and affordable housing units that were granted on zoned lands, refused, planning on appeal, by people with holiday homes in the area appealing it to Onboard Planola, and it getting overturned for much needed social and affordable homes. Everything that rang through from the Sligo branch hits home with me there. I'm an auctioneer in Dingle by trade. I see it firsthand from the local people I grew up with. They can't get on the housing markets. Prices are gone out of control. We don't have enough stock in the market. We don't have enough rental homes. We don't have people with lands can't get planning on their lands. They're being refused because we're in a tourism area. All this is leading to a situation throughout this country where we have housing for no one at all. The situation about the elderly people looking to downsize and younger families looking to move up. We see that, I see it every day in my job especially. I meet people that are living in rural locations that would love to move into the town, to be closer to facilities and amenities. They can't because the properties aren't there for them. They can't because there's no help there for them. There needs to be a big shift in policy, and I think the Labour Party are the party to do that and help with housing. We need the delivery of more housing because this government that's in place is delivering no housing for no one at all, in my opinion. And I want to strongly support the motion from the Sligo branch that there needs to be a lot of thinking outside the box and thinking towards delivering more social housing and affordable housing for everybody. Thank you.
Michael, I don't see anyone else offering. Oh, Conall O'Boyle, apologies. So just name constituency and the motion you're speaking to.
Gormahagat, Lisa, Gormahagat, comrades. My name is Conall O'Boyle. I am from the Carlow Kilkenny branch, but I'd like to speak today on motion 20 as a proud Donegal man. I'm a proud Donegal man who thanks the stars every day that his family house isn't riddled with mica. But I'm also the same man whose family and friends go to sleep every night in a home that is crumbling around them. I'm a proud Donegal man who's seen his people held to ransom by the banks and by mortgage lenders who prioritise their bottom line over the basic health and safety. And this is something which will result in funerals of the victims of a mica catastrophe someday. Who here thinks that asking to live in a house that is not falling down is too much to ask? I'm a proud Donegal man and I see Fianna Fáil, a party happy to bail out the banks with no interest in bailing out the people that elect them in the forgotten county. I'm a Donegal man and I am absolutely disgusted. Before I see a catastrophe unfold in my hometown of Muff, we need the government to expedite the process of absolutely guaranteeing 100% mica redress, unequivocal, unambiguous, uncompromising, absolute guarantee. Comrades, as we see the impacts of the housing disaster unfolding in the towns and cities of our island, we cannot forget the housing emergency which endangers the livelihoods of our fellow citizens in Mayo, in Limerick, in Clare, in Sligo, in Leitrim and in Donegal. And I am a proud Donegal man. And I am proud to support this motion. And I think it's in the spirit of solidarity that we should all support this motion today. Go Mahagaf, go Mahagaf.
So, Laura Harmon.
Hi Conference, Laura Harmon, member of Cork South Central and candidate for Cork City South West. I want to support motion 21 in particular. This clearly shows that Labour has a clear, radical and researched plan for housing in this country, and this current government have failed by every reasonable measure to deliver on housing. Housing prices have skyrocketed. As a renter myself, I know that rents have never been higher. We have over 13,500 people homeless. 4,027 children are homeless in this country, and dereliction is rife. In Cork City Centre alone, there are 700 vacant properties within a 2-kilometre radius of the city centre. And just the other night, I was in Bishopstown canvassing, and I was talking to neighbours, and I saw a house, and it's been vacant for 14 years. Rats live in that house now. That is just one of thousands of houses across the country that are vacant, while we have homeless people sleeping without roofs over their heads. My own generation, so people that were born after 1985 or thereabouts, we've been locked out of the housing market. And there are massive transfers of wealth happening between my generation, younger generations, and older landlords in this country. And when my generation hits pension age, or when our bodies are too tired to work anymore, are we going to be homeless? Are we going to have poverty in old age? And this is not good enough. And we must never forget that this government has cared more for vulture funds than it has for people like you or me who want to have a roof over our heads. The housing crisis is a stain of shame on this country. And Labour has a plan, it has a clear plan, it has a radical plan, it has a well-researched plan. So I want to vote for this motion. Thank you.
So, any final speakers to speak to any of the motions under the housing section? Emma. Councillor Emma Cutlip-Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, comrades. Emma Cutlip, councillor in Drogheda in County Louth. This government has normalised extortion. Extortionate rents, extortionate prices, and the normalisation of no-fault evictions. Labour can and will, and we do work tirelessly to change this. And I want to take this opportunity to say, as someone who a short few years ago had my world fall away to a no-fault eviction with my newborn son into temporary homelessness, I say to renters and hopeful homeowners, none of this is your fault. And I, as a councillor, along with every TD and senator and every other councillor and member of the Labour Party, will fight for you every day with everything that we have. And one further short comment, I specifically thank my comrade Anne Withera Burke from Greystones for her motion with respect to housing for disabled people. We must and we will demand that new housing is not only disabled access or access adaptable, but that it is wheelchair livable, that it is functional for disabled people, that it will be D+ or better. And I commend these motions. Thank you very much, comrades.
Thanks, Emma. So I don't see, Eddie, apologies, Eddie McGuinness.
My name is Eddie McGuinness. I am a candidate for local elections for Dublin Bay South. My passion is that in 1993, my mother turned around to me and said to me, make sure you get on the housing list. It took me until 2009 to actually get a home. I am proud to say, and the passion that it was Joe Costello who got me my home in 2009 after sleeping rough for a year, and I couldn't tell anyone. This is what Labour is about. They are a voice for those who do not have a home. We need to fight together and give that passion back and speak up for those who no longer have a home, and also at the same time for those who are coming into this country who need a home together collectively. I am passionate about this motion, and together collectively, I'm not afraid to say, I've been homeless twice in my life, and it was only for Labour got me my home. So together, let's build homes and build an Ireland for all.
Well done, Eddie. So Sean O'Hurgan looking to speak.
Sean O'Hurgan, Crave Charlie Smith, and candidate for Kilkenny City in the local elections. I want to speak to these motions, particularly as Aoife has already mentioned, in the memory of Emmett Stagg, who proved as a Labour Minister for Housing that we prioritise the provision of homes for people. Back in the 1990s, he more than trebled the amount of social housing being built in this country in the 2 years he was Junior Minister for Housing. Likewise, Jimmy Tully of Meath did the same in the 1970s with the single biggest social housing programme ever delivered in this state. The media and some of our public representatives scoff at Labour's plans for housing, at building 1 million houses in the period that we need to do so. But I particularly want to speak today as a parent There are many young people up here, like Laura, who have spoken about the issues. But for many parents, it is the fading light of our hopes for housing for our sons and daughters who are in their 20s and 30s that really concern us. The right that I and my wife had in the 1990s to go out and achieve a mortgage for an affordable house on relatively modest public service and private sector incomes is gone. It is being taken away from our young people, and we say it has to be said clearly from this stage. That is an ideological choice made by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. They have taken away the right of housing. And the single most depressing moment I had as a councillor, and I hope to be back there again, was when in 2009 we got a letter from the Fianna Fáil Minister for Housing instructing Kilkenny County Council and every other council in the country to shut down our housing departments, stop repairing houses and stop providing people with their rights. We need Labour back in our councils and we need Labour back in government so that the human right to a house and a roof over your head is the most fundamental right of our state, in line with our 1916 declaration, in line with the programme, the democratic programme of Tom Johnson in 2019. Let's get back in there and let's start building this nation again.
And the final speaker I see indicating to speak on the housing section is Ian McGahan.
Conference. The motion from the Wicklow constituency particularly points out the situation that disabled people face in this country. Conference, the housing crisis is an outrage. It makes housing inaccessible to the vast majority of you who are able-bodied. But it is doubly an outrage because it makes it doubly inaccessible for disabled people. Conference, people at the margins of this society are treated worst in the housing crisis, and it is an outrage, and we need to end this, and we need to prioritise disabled people in housing too.
Thanks, Ian. So I'm going to invite our party spokesperson on housing to respond to the debate. So our party leader and party spokesperson on housing, Ivana Bacek.
Guramahagut Lisa, and I'm proud to stand here as housing spokesperson for the party and to follow those really powerful contributions from our great local candidates and local councillors. And I want to thank Dermot, Aoife, Ali, Annie, Shane, Michael, Fiona, James, Carol, Nessa, Declan, Mike, Connell, Laura, Emma, Eddie, Sean and Ian for really thoughtful, really passionate contributions, illustrating just the passion and the commitment and the energy within the Labour Party to tackle what is indeed the civil rights issue of our generation. It is indeed, and it's the issue that cuts through every generation. We've heard how it's a children's rights issue, with over 4,000 children now in homelessness, a shameful record for this government. Children who are forced to do homework on the floors of hotel bedrooms because they've no homes of their own. It's an issue for a generation of younger adults too, and we heard from some of those affected today and last night at our event last night. We heard from people who are trapped in their childhood bedrooms, living at home with their parents into their 30s, no prospect of a home of their own, or trapped in rental trap, paying off someone else's mortgage in that transfer of wealth you heard about from Laura, unable to afford to save for a home of their own. And it's an issue for older generations, worried that their own children will never get a home of their own, or themselves stuck in rental insecurity. And I think of one constituent of mine, a man of retirement age, who recently told me that after decades on the housing list, he believes he will be dead before he is allocated a home of his own. And that is shameful for this government. So we in Labour believe in housing as an inalienable human right. And we want to ensure that the aspiration for a safe and secure home is more than an aspiration, that it can become a reality for the younger generation trapped at home, for the older generation stuck in insecurity, and for the children, far too many of whom are in insecure accommodation as we speak. And we have a plan in Labour to tackle this, because we can fix the the housing crisis. It can be done. And you've heard today across those 11 motions some innovative and creative and radical ways that we can develop to fix housing. You've heard about how we need to build a state construction company, to develop ways and means to ensure that local authorities are enabled to harness the power of the state and the resources of the state to deliver social and affordable homes on state-owned land. And that's central to our Labour vision. You've heard about how we propose to energise a proactive recruitment campaign to bring back and bring in the skilled construction workers we so badly need. And how we need to ensure that apprentices are paid decently, so we encourage more people here to enter construction trades. You've heard about how we want to empower local authorities to CPO vacant and derelict properties, to end the scourge of dereliction across communities and repurpose vacant buildings for homes. And you've heard about how we want to ensure a radical reform of the planning system, to ensure that we have a use it or lose it policy in place, so that speculation by property developers, it can be ended and can be tackled. There's no energy in the current government, the failing government, to do this. But we in Labour have the energy. We have the commitment to do this. And we're putting forward a radical programme of change to ensure that we can deliver that ambitious proposal for 1 million homes over a decade. 50,000 new builds a year in line with the real need out there, and 50,000 refurbishments and deep retrofits a year, again in line with the necessary targets to meet our climate ambitions. That's what we can do, and that's what we will do. And not forgetting the motions rooted in local communities, the motions about ensuring that homeowners have adequate redress where they have been so adversely impacted by defective concrete and by micro scandals. And you've heard about the local community in Ringsend in Irishtown, desperate for social and affordable housing to be provided on the Irish Glass Bottle site. These are the local and national campaigns that our Labour candidates and our Labour representatives are engaged in every day. We heard last night also about how a European-wide plan to tackle housing can really be effective. How we can see the power of the European Union harnessed to build homes, to deliver homes. Just as we've seen a common agricultural policy rolled out, so too we need a common housing policy. But to do that at European level, at local level, at government level, we need to ensure that Labour representatives are elected in 11 weeks' time on 7th June to the local chambers where decisions are made and to the European Parliament where decisions are made. Decisions that can and should fix the housing disaster for all of our generations, for our children, for our young people and for our older generations too. So comrades, I urge you to join with us in this collective endeavour to tackle the housing crisis, to adopt our innovative and radical policies for change on housing, and to ensure that Labour representatives, like those wonderful contributors this morning, that Labour representatives are elected to our local councils, to our national parliament whenever that time comes, and of course also to the European Parliament. And I want to ensure that Niamh Horrigan in Ireland South, Eoin O'Riordan in Dublin are elected to represent us in Europe and to build an Ireland that works for all, a Europe that works for all, and crucially, a country in which everyone can achieve that dream, that aspiration of a safe and secure home of their own. Thank you.
So thanks, Ivana, for responding to the debate under our housing section. So ordinarily I have been taking votes after each section, but just in the interest of time, I'm going to take the voting on the housing section at the end with the voting on the local government section. So just moving on to now the next section, which deals with local government. We've motions 39, motion 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, and then the final motion is in the name of the Glen Cullen Sandyford branch, which is circulating outside of the report in line with Standing Orders Report number 1 this morning. So also, in the interest of time, I'm going to take motion 43 first in the name of Labour Women, just because they have a lunchtime event to facilitate them moving their motion and also to get to the event for 1 p.m. So I'll take motion 43 first. So Hannah Deasy.
Thank you, Chair. Hannah Deasy, Labour Women Chair. Conference. At a first glance, this motion might seem to be about a mere issue of electoral administration. The issue of candidates' addresses and ballot papers might not seem to be one that we should prioritise here today. Labour Women are proud of the 40 female candidates who have been selected to represent our party on the 7th of June. But delegates, we live in a time where all too often it has become acceptable to mistreat and abuse those who seek or who hold public office. As so many of you here know, online abuse has become ever more vitriolic, and worse again, offline, credible threats are becoming more and more commonplace. Sadly, we have moved far from what was once the norm, to treat our fellow citizens who have the courage to seek to represent their communities with respect. While once it may have made sense to insist on the inclusion of addresses on ballot papers, how can it be justified in these circumstances that are so far from that previous norm? If you fear for the safety of your own family, are you likely to run for election? What will happen if a crowd shows up at your house? Will a brick be thrown through your window? This silencing effect, created by this growing toxicity, is reducing the diversity of candidates contesting elections. And in turn, that reduces the diversity of our democracy. If our democracy doesn't represent the people, it doesn't live up to its promises. It is no longer a representative democracy. So you see, delegates, this motion is actually not just about administration. It is about the very urgent and very real need to protect diversity of representation in our democracy. I urge you to support this motion and our candidates on June 7th. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. Is there a seconder for motion 43? Formal seconder, Linda O'Sullivan. Thanks, Linda. So I'm going to come back to motion 39. I'm going to take each motion, a mover and a seconder, and then we'll have the common debate at the end. So motion 39 in the name of the Clonsilla branch, Councillor John Walsh.
Thanks, Chair. Conference, colleagues, John Walsh, Dublin West constituency. It's no secret, Conference, that local government in Ireland is among the weakest in Europe. And this is not an accident, but it's a result of deliberate government policies by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, which have consistently undermined the role of local authorities in planning and housing. And this is not an abstract issue. It's something that has real world effects on people's lives. When local councils are denied the ability to plan properly, when they're denied the ability to provide social and affordable housing in sufficient numbers, when local councils are unable and are denied the ability to provide for infrastructure, school places and essential community infrastructure in conjunction with housing. A recent report by the Council of Europe ranked local democracy in Ireland as the 4th worst in Europe. And in case you were wondering, our closest comparators were Russia, Hungary and Moldova. So it's not a great league table for Minister Darragh O'Brien and his immediate predecessors, alongside Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban. The last two governments have systematically asset-stripped local government, and both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have relentlessly centralised power in national government. Simon Coveney, as Minister for Housing, adopted wholesale the plans of the developer lobby and adopted undemocratic fast-track planning for large-scale developments, which undermined the role of local councils. Owen Murphy, remember him, not a man that Fine Gael like to talk about anymore. To quote the old Carlsberg ad, probably the worst local government minister in the history of the state, although there's plenty of competition for that title. Minister Murphy Minister Murphy drove forward strategic housing developments and co-living units, which he presented as a major part of the solution to the housing crisis. We know exactly how that worked out. Instead, what happened was that large-scale development was handed over to speculators, to large-scale developers and to vulture funds, with predictable results on the housing market. Minister Murphy described co-living units as boutique hotels, but surprisingly, he had no desire to live in one himself, perhaps because they would have ended up more like tenements. The current minister, Darragh O'Brien, perhaps benefiting from comparisons with Minister Murphy, it couldn't be much worse, has proposed a further radical centralisation of power through the latest planning and development bill. And he seeks to restrict the ability of local communities and residents to participate in planning, perpetuating the myth that residents and communities have caused the housing crisis instead of the undemocratic and unworkable policies of central government. I'm delighted to see that Deputy Ivana Bacik and our spokespersons have stood up against this and pointed out the chilling impact of the latest local government bill. Conference, it's time for change. It's time for Labour to take the lead in reversing centralisation and restoring local democracy in Ireland. I'm delighted to propose the motion.
Is there a seconder for motion 39? Mary McCamley. Thanks, Mary. So moving now to motion 40 in the name of the Kinnegad branch. Dennis.
Dennis Leonard, Kinnegad branch, Westmeath. A revision of the National Planning Framework is due to get underway shortly, and it can't come quickly enough for our quality of life and our sustainable future. It's killing rural Ireland and causing one of the biggest migrations from our small towns and villages since the famine. The focus of this government and this framework seems to be on large towns and cities to the detriment of our small towns in rural Ireland. As you travel throughout our country, you see towns and villages with deserted shops, restaurants, pubs, banks, Garda stations, petrol stations, and sometimes schools being replaced with derelict buildings and passed up for all forms of public transport. You then reach large towns, choked with traffic and oversubscribed services at breaking point. As I travel around my own area of Westmeath and the Longford-Westmeath constituency, I see health centres closed down in places like Rochford Bridge. Education in places like Kinnegad, where the council and developers moved in 3,000 people in the noughties and then left them without a secondary school. Transport in places like Calucan, where the train stops 8 times a day at a closed station and lets no one on or off because the government won't spend 5 million to open it, while meanwhile thousands of us spend the days on the M4, it seems like, on a choked motorway. Policing all over rural Westmeath, where Garda cover has nearly been moved from all towns to Mullingar and Athlone. Banking, where Bank of Ireland closed 4 rural town banks in one day in our county and left us with just 2 in Mullingar and Athlone. These same people we built out, leaving older people online, leaving businesses suffering. Where are the public banks promised by Labour and others? They need to happen now. Housing is a major failure of this government we've just heard about. In small towns in rural Ireland, where no one can get a house in a place where they lived and grew up, even if it was affordable. And rural farm families, where the next generation has to live in the town and drive out to the farm. In Westmeath, it seems you can only get a house in Mullingar or Athlone, built along bypass, supposed bypass after bypass. Enterprise not being supported by the framework, where so many towns in our county, from Kinnegad, Calucan, Rochford Bridge, Delvin and Castlepollard, are left without a business park where people could work close to home and have a quality of life. And tourism, where sometimes the only hotel is closed down. Community facilities, where so many are left without parks, playgrounds, community centres and basic amenities. This national framework of planning is a misguided policy, and if it continues, we'll have 2 or 3 large towns in every county, with most people living on the east coast around Dublin and the rest of us under the National Parks and Wildlife Service. Climate change means people living in their community and enterprise ventures and having working. It means going to school locally. It means having a local doctor and local shops. It means local community centres and local facilities. It's the way we always were, and this is certainly not progress. Finally, can I just say, the national planning framework is not fit for purpose. It is for city and large town based, and more than half of us wake up, live in rural Ireland. We need local facilities kept local. Many of the politicians in the current government and current parties can't see beyond Houston Station. It's about time we did. I commend this motion.
Thanks, Dennis. Is there a formal seconder for motion 40? John Pratt. Councillor John Pratt. Thanks, John. So moving on to motion 41 in the name of the Newbridge branch. Councillor Mark Lee.
Councillor Mark Lee, Kildare South, on behalf of the Newbridge branch. The need for immediate action to address infrastructural challenges in large towns like Newbridge and Athy is pressing. In terms of transport, gridlock, inadequate road networks and a lack of sustainable transportation options are increasingly hindering residents' quality of life. To alleviate these issues, Labour calls on the government to establish dedicated task forces within each local authority. These task forces would spearhead infrastructural development initiatives, prioritising the provision of roads, bridges and essential amenities such as cycle lanes and playing pitches. Playing pitches are needed in towns like Athy and Kildare Town. Investment from the government is needed immediately for these facilities. In the case of Newbridge, a second bridge or newer bridge is absolutely vital for traffic movement in the town. In large towns like Newbridge, where congestion is a growing concern, the task force will work closely with the government to implement strategic solutions. This would involve the urgent provision of public town buses to ease traffic congestion and provide alternative transportation options for residents. Additionally, integrating cycle lanes into road infrastructure projects is essential to promote sustainable and eco-friendly modes of transport. Transport links are vital for reinvigorating the bypass towns such as Castledermot and Athy. Tackling dereliction in towns throughout Kildare is not unique to one, but all towns. Castledermot, Athy, Kildare and Newbridge need to be high on the government's agenda. By establishing these task forces and providing immediate government support, local authorities can effectively tackle the infrastructural challenges plaguing large towns. The collaboration between government agencies and local authorities is crucial in developing comprehensive plans that address the specific needs of each community. With swift action and a focus on sustainable development, these initiatives can only enhance mobility, reduce congestion and improve overall urban livability for all residents, but also reinvigorate the towns by reducing dereliction and providing more retail, accommodation and much needed facilities. I ask you to support the motion.
Thanks, Mark. So Sean O'Horgan to second motion 41.
Sean O'Horgan, Crave Charlie Smith, and candidate in the local elections for Kilkenny City. I'd like to second motion 41 and also speak in favour of the sections of motion 45 in relation to the restoration of town councils. A chahiirlig agus a cumráid. Mar gine a cha demlí an hanafin chorla burga Kilchinnig, takim goláidir leis an galúint gnéanamid avrenú omláin an 8 rialta seáitiúil atá demlíon an bhód inis. Dhéan an ach sin dochar fásach dar górlaí áitiúla agus don levéal déanlachas is táchtaí dar séaránathe agus dar bobal. As we reach the 10th anniversary of the disastrous 2014 Local Government Act, which was supposed to give us so-called better local government, I warmly welcome motion 45, which commits our party to fully reviewing the Act and reversing its outrageous attacks on local government. And in relation to motion 41, the real solution, while I agree with task forces in the short term, is to give us back our councils in large towns and small cities that were taken away from us in that Act. What we need, far from better local government, what we have now is worse local government, with hugely increased powers for chief executives of councils, and we have become the only country in Europe which has abolished its city councils in Waterford and Limerick and borough councils in towns and cities like Kilkenny and town councils all over the country. Towns like Newbridge, with a population of 22,000 people, are reduced to glorified subcommittees of county councils. Apart from the stripping away of 700 years of municipal history in the case of our own city, the crisis in our town centres can only be properly addressed by restoring these councils, which were financially incredibly efficient. It would also right what one of our former party leaders admitted was one of the biggest mistakes in the last government in which we took part. It is time for us to get our councils back, to allow them to be really representative as they are in every civilized country in Europe, and to ensure that our communities have the lowest level, the principle of subsidiarity of the European Union is re-established in giving us real local voices, real control over the issues that affect our communities. Gormagh.
Thanks, Sean. So moving on to motion 42 now in the name of the Dundrum Sean Fitzpatrick branch. Councillor Peter O'Brien to move.
Thanks, Chair. Peter O'Brien, Dundrum Sean Fitzpatrick branch. Conference, I've been a public representative for 9 years, and there's many people here that have served a lot longer than us. One of the most frustrating answers that we get back if we submit a motion or a question is it's on the next tendering process, or we have to outsource it, or we can't do that. This motion is calling that the increase of outsourcing what is council services, we're looking to stop that. There are services that have in the past been provided by the council and the services that should be provided by the council. We're looking at turnaround of housing, what Ivana spoke about, of 50,000 houses a year. That can be done by the local authorities, and it could be done if there's staffing in the local authorities. What this motion is calling for is a work group to be set up comprising of trade union officials or trade union activists, elected representatives, director of services, community groups and education boards. What we want is qualified tradespeople back in the local authorities. What we want is those tradespeople to teach apprentices in local authorities. So we would have direct services back in local government. It's where it should be. Crucially, members, these jobs will be unionised. The motion that the Labour Trade Unions Group passed this morning has said that for contracts for outsourcing has to be given to groups that are unionised. The problem is in local authorities, the parks, the houses are given to outside companies with poor working terms and conditions, and that is an absolute disgrace. What we are looking for is jobs. This is for you. This is for your families. Jobs for people in Dunleary Rathdown that they can have, they know they can get a decent wage. They know what they're getting at the end of the week. They know what they're getting every month. They've pensionable jobs, they've real jobs. Local authorities can be the leading figure in this. We look at across Europe, we look at the remunicipalisation of services. I see my friend Adrian Kane here. The waste services in every local authority, you can have 20 groups that are collecting waste. They should be brought back into local authorities. They should be unionised and they should be for the community, for us.
Motion 42. Formal seconder. Councillor Brian McDonough. Thanks, Brian. We still have motion 44, motion 45 and motion 91 in relation to dog parks. I have indication that speakers would like to oppose some of the motions that have been put to the floor, and we also have to facilitate the party spokesperson, Senator Mark Wall, to respond to the debate. So I'm putting to the conference floor if I can propose an extension of 15 minutes into the lunchtime, so to move this session to 1:15 and then to move our plenary session 3 from 2 to 2:15, which will conclude at 3:45, just to facilitate the different contributions, the debate and the party leader to respond. So can I put that to the conference floor? Is there a seconder? John Phelan to second. And is that acceptable? Agreed. Thanks, conference. So then just moving on to motion 44 in the name of Central Council, is there a mover for motion 44? James Kearney. And James, just on your way up to the podium, there's lunch can be availed of in the lobby, which it's now open for anyone who wants to stagger their lunchtime, and the Labour Women event are also having a lunchtime event, just to put conference on notice of that. So James, over to yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Again, James Kearney, Killeen-Shankill, Hugh Nevin branch. To introduce motion 44, when I was looking at the first time at Central Council meetings, I said to myself, it looks a bit like a kind of a CSPE type question. What does the Dáil, Shannon, regional assemblies and local government do? But to be honest, as a first time candidate and having more experience, a lot of people either on the doors or themselves involved don't fully know or are fully unaware of the powers that are given to them or that they're seeking to hold. And I do think this is an important thing for us to clarify and develop out further. Firstly, in terms of local government, as John Welsh mentioned, in terms of local government, our local government in Ireland has been decimated over the past number of decades, and as a result we are so hamstrung in terms of what we can and can't do. So we of course need to expand local government. On the other side of things though, because of how centralised our government is to the Dáil, we have TDs who act as glorified county councillors, if I could be so brash about it. Some of them still revel in this for the parish pump that it generates them, but if we're electing people to our national parliament, they should be focused on national issues. And if we're electing people to our local council, they should be working on local issues. And then those who are elected to the Seanad should be working on their Seanad board issues. Same with the regional assemblies. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that our local government is enhanced, but also to clarify what these different sections can and can't do. And I will pass you on to Dermot Lacey, who knows a lot more about local government than I do, to further explain issues like this. Thank you.
Dermot Lacey, Councillor Dermot Lacey.
Don't think I've ever been introduced that way. Dermot Lacey, Pembroke Tom Johnson branch, and a member of the Central Council. Every 7 years, the Council of Europe issues a report on local government in their country. And the Council issued a report on Ireland last November. And they rated us as having the 4th worst system in Europe. The only countries that were worse than us were those paragons of democracy of Moldova, Hungary, and Russia. And the government promised that they would respond to this issue, and they did. In the weeks following the issuing of that report, they issued the Planning and Development Bill, which stripped councillors of more powers and stripped communities of more powers. They introduced legislation to abolish the joint policing committees that stripped councillors of further powers. And incredibly, the Green Party minister, the party that is meant to be all about taking decisions at the lowest level and in support of local government, stripped councillors of powers in relation to traffic matters. This government has been the key and core enemy of local government since it entered office. The motion before you from the Central Council, and I'm proposing 45 in this chair as well, the motion from the Central Council sets out some of the things that we would like to do. We'd like to see reform of the Local Government Act, and I could keep you here for hours on what reforms I'd like to see in that myself. Restoration of the municipal, the town councils, the strengthening of the democratic legitimacy of the regional assemblies. We want independent finance raising, which is core to any reform of local government. If councillors want more power, they have to exercise responsibility in relation to finance raising. I've always accepted it's a two-way process. I want more power and I want more responsibility. Lastly, we want to strengthen the role of councillors. If we are going to challenge the far right in this country, and I'll finish on this, if we're going to challenge the far right, the best way to challenge the far right is to strengthen our democratic form of governance. Democratic form of governance in this country has been whittled away at national level and at local level and at regional level. Let us be the party of democracy. Let us be the party of local government. This motion sets out how we can do it. I urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dermot. Dermot, can I just clarify, were you speaking to motion 45? Dermot? Sorry? You were moving motion 45? Okay, thanks. Dermot. No, I think you've met your threshold there in terms of the time and what we can facilitate. So James moved motion 44. Can I get a formal seconder for Centre Annie Hoey to second motion 44? Dermot Lacey then moved motion 45 from the floor. Is there a seconder for motion 45? I'll take Pamela Kearns. Thanks, though, for the offer. So Pamela to second motion 45. And then the final motion we have is in the name of the Glencullen Sandyford branch. So mover for, or apologies, it's motion 91. So mover for motion 91. Councillor Letty McCarthy.
Hello everybody, Letty McCarthy, the Glencullen Sandyford Board in Dublin Rathdown, and I'm going to talk to you briefly about the benefits of dog off-leash areas to both the dogs and their owners. And first of all, I suppose I'll say I am fortunate enough to have the most adorable dog I think anybody could have, Evie. just saying. And I also represent the urban and rural area, which again I think I'm fortunate to do. So obviously acutely aware of the need to have dogs on leash, especially during the lambing season and areas in the uplands where there would be animals that dog could chase. But to get back to our responsibility as dog owners, it is important to obviously provide good food, but also exercise. And I don't just mean on the lead or on the leash. And dog off-leash areas, so dog parks, where they're secure, where they're safe, where dogs get an opportunity to explore, to exercise, to socialise, to learn the dogs that don't like them. Evie has a huge problem deciding every dog in the world doesn't love her, but she has to learn that lesson. And the best way to learn it is not to be attached to the lead and not to feel she's protecting me, her dog owner. But the benefit it also brings to dog owners. There is, in our local dog park, it's like the men's shed and women's shed combined. It has become almost a therapy area where dog owners get together. They solve the problems of the world, but it's a place to socialise and it's a place to meet. And at a time where we are witnessing more loneliness in our communities, this is a great opportunity for people to come together through a shared love of their own dogs. So I am calling this conference to ask for every local authority to provide an off-leash area to provide for dogs and for their dog owners, and it's only a benefit to society. Thank you.
Thanks, Letty. Is there a seconder for motion 91? Someone to formally second. Councillor Brian MacDonagh. Thanks, Brian. So now moving to the common debate on motions relating to motions 39 up to motions 45 in addition to motion 91. So the first speaker who had indicated they wanted to speak in the common debate was Councillor Joanna Tuffy. So if you could just name the motion you're speaking to as well, Joanna.
It wouldn't be a Labour Party conference if no one speaks or votes against any motion, that there was no dissent or disagreement. So I'm here to start the ball rolling and to speak against motion number 43. There's a phrase at the end of the motion which says that conference mandates the PLP to campaign for this measure. That's not the role of conference. Conference develops policy. It does not mandate any member what to do or what to think. We've always been a broad church and we have allowed dissent. Where would be the likes of Frank Lusky or Jim Kemmy be if we had a policy that they could be mandated by conference what to say, what to think, what to campaign on? So that's the first and that's the fundamental reason I oppose this. Also, I think it changes the nature of our political system where councillors and politicians and candidates are on the same level as voters and members of the public. People know where their candidates live, they're part of the community. It acts as if politicians are more at risk of abuse than any other member of the public or any voter, and that isn't true. And any member of the public, I can go in and any member of the public can go in and access the name of and address of any voter. And for a voter to be accepted from that, they have to go and get a court decision or other alternative similar stringent measures. In fact, there already is, and this is acknowledged in the motion, we already have exceptions. Candidates don't have to have their address published on the ballot paper. They can provide an office address, they can provide the Dáil or council address, or they can provide a PO box. In Northern Ireland, the Maria Cahill case, she raised the issue of the choice not to publish her address, and legislation was brought in subsequent to her case. That legislation in Northern Ireland brings in what we already have here. It's a candidate's choice. I want my address to be published on the ballot paper, and that should be my choice. I suppose fundamentally, we shouldn't mandate people what to do or what to think. We shouldn't have people doing one thing in the party like happened in the recent referendum in Fianna Fáil where they say one thing and then they vote a different way. PLP members and any member of the party is entitled to freedom of thought and freedom of speech and freedom to dissent. So I urge that you vote against this motion.
Anyone else looking to speak on the common debate to any of the motions relating to motions 39 to 45 and 91? Any other speakers? Okay, so I'm going to move then to invite the party spokesperson, Senator Mark Wall, to respond to the debate on local government.
Thanks very much, Lisa. Senator Mark Wall, Athy Branch, Kildare South. Delegates, comrades, first of all, I want to remember a man who was very important to us in Kildare South. It's very unusual for people from Kildare to be at a conference, a Labour Party conference, and not to have Emmett Stagg with us. As other colleagues have said, Emmett Stagg was Labour, and he was very much epitomised what Kildare Labour stand for, and to not have him here is very important. For those of us who stood in Straffan, and his beloved Straffan graveyard the other day as he was laid to rest, we learned three important things that were important to Emmett Stagg. The first, of course, was family, Mary and his children, and it's very much his beloved family. The second was his community of North Kildare, his community of Straffan, and how important they were to Emmett. And most importantly, and the third part, was the Labour Party. And it came out loud and clear how important the Labour Party were to Emmett Stagg. So let's remember Emmett, and let's always remember Emmett Stagg for a standard bearer for us in Kildare, but also for the Labour Party. Delegates, the Kinnegad and Newbridge branches speak of similar problems that we all have as public representatives in our small and indeed medium-sized towns. This government, time and time again, do not get the importance of our towns and villages, and more importantly, the community that lives there. Their failure to recognise the importance of sustainable development, not just to build concrete jungles, is a hallmark of failed local planning by Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and indeed the Greens. What is needed now is joined-up thinking, the provision of infrastructure and community facilities that will return a heartbeat to our rural towns. Take community playing facilities, for example. Our public reps right around the country are working with communities and sports clubs who cannot take to the playing fields simply because they do not exist. Labour in government would provide for shared community facilities in every town with a population of greater than 5,000, as well as supporting those smaller communities. I see my colleagues here from Waterford, where there is a need and land is at a premium, and it must happen. We must start building shared community facilities. Councillor Lee spoke about the problems in Newbridge, very dear to my heart, and what we need to do is provide proper infrastructure and build a second bridge to unclog a great town that is Newbridge. Delegates, when I travelled to Mullingar very recently, I learned from Councillor Dennis Leonard, who spoke today, Councillor Penrose, and indeed our excellent candidate Fidelma Bennett, who's with us here today as well, of the many problems that are facing the towns in Westmeath and the villages of Westmeath indeed. As Dennis says, we have main streets derelict, we have lack of school places, no GPs existent, and this is a problem and is a direct failure of joined-up government thinking. The Labour Party delegates are proud of our history in rural Ireland. We are very proud of our many public reps in rural Ireland who work tirelessly day in, day out in their communities. Labour in government would ensure proper rural development, ensuring no village is left behind and that our towns have the facilities and infrastructure that they deserve. My colleague Peter O'Brien made a very important point about outsourcing of work by local authorities. The delays such outsourcing is having on the turnaround of vacant local authority housing, as we heard from Councillor Aoife Breslin earlier on today, is in my opinion too, and the opinion of others, feeding directly into the housing crisis. We need dedicated local authority staff like what we had in the past, going around, turning around local authority homes in weeks and not in the months and years. That is the case in this housing crisis at the moment. And as Peter says, proper unionised labour as well. John Walsh spoke from a Conciliar branch about the local democracy, and again Dermot saying about us having the fourth worst in Europe, a record I'm sure no government should be proud of. What we need, boys, and coming up is in our planning bill, let there be no doubt that we as a PLP will question and seek to amend this bill as it makes its way through the Oireachtas. As a member of the Shannon Public Consultation Committee, we are currently discussing the future of local government. Let me say, as I have done at that committee, that the removal of town councils was a huge mistake. As Sean O'Hargan has said, and others have said as well, including Brendan Howden, Labour would restore town councils, restoring local democracy. We actually have a bill that government could adopt in the morning if there was a will from government to do so. I want to support my good friend Letty McCarthy in relation to the dog parks. As an ardent dog lover, it is very important that our friends have a place to play, and also those dog lovers, I'm sure, have a place to bring them as often as possible. Finally, Chair, I want to inform Conference that we will have 100 local councillors, local reps ready to go in the local elections in 11 weeks' time. Labour women make a very important point, and for once I disagree with my good colleague Joanne in relation to what's happening in relation to the addresses, because I know from speaking to people that this is a problem for women candidates in particular, but also for all candidates in relation to providing their address on the ballot paper. And it is an issue that as a member of the PLP that I will fight and continue to fight, because there should be no barrier to anybody putting their name on a ballot paper, and I think that has to be mentioned loud and clear. What we need is more women in politics. We need to ensure that there's no barriers exist in allowing women and any other members of our local communities from choosing to put their name forward. The Labour Party will present 100+ candidates in the local elections. I'm asking every one of you to get behind them. I know you will, because we have the best candidates. We have the best candidates from Sligo right down to Waterford, from Kerry right through Dublin and back up to Louth and everywhere in between. It's time the Labour Party were restored where they belong, at the heart of local democracy. Delegates, let's get out behind our colleagues. The local elections are 11 weeks away. Let's build Labour once again. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mark, for a great way to finish this session. So just two things to cover then before we move off for lunch. I just need to go back and hold the votes on the housing section. So moving back to motion 16, which is what started this session off earlier this morning. So by way of showing delegate cards again, all those in favour of motion 16, which was the composite motion in the name of Dublin Bay South and Dublin Bay North. All those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Motion 16 is carried. Motion 17 in the name of the Athy branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 17 is carried. Motion 18 then in the name of the Wicklow constituency. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Motion 18 is carried. Motion 19 then in the name of the Donaghmede branch. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Motion 19 is carried. Motion 20 then in the name of the Donegal branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 20 is carried. Motion 21 then in the name of Dublin Bay South. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 21 is carried. Then motion 22 in the name of the Dún Laoghaire constituency. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 22 is carried. Then motion 23 wasn't moved by anyone from the Santry Kilmore branch. So motion 23 has fallen. Motion 24 then in the name of the Shelburne branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 24 is carried. And the second last motion under housing, motion 25 in the name of the Sligo branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 25 is carried. And then the last motion under housing, motion 26 in the name of Central Council. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 26 has fallen. And then the last section, just moving back to the section under local government, motion 39 in the name of the Clonsilla branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 39 is carried. Motion 40 in the name of the Kinnegad branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 40 is carried. Motion 41 in the name of the Newbridge branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 41 is carried. Motion 42 then in the name of the Dundrum Sean Fitzpatrick branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion 42 is carried. Motion 43 was the first motion we dealt with under this section in the name of Labour Women. Motion 43, those in favour? Those against? Dermot, I'll ask you to just look at a count if that's okay, just in terms of that vote. So motion 43, the Labour Women motion, those in favour? You okay, Dermot? Yeah. Those against? Abstentions? Okay. So the motion was carried by 24 to 20, so 24 in favour, 20 against. So motion 43 was carried. Motion 44 in the name of Central Council, those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Motion 44 is carried. Motion 45 then in the name of Central Council, those in favour? Against? Abstentions? And motion 45 is carried. And then the last motion, which is motion 91 in relation to dog parks in the name of the Glencullen Sandyford branch. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? So motion 91 then is carried. So thanks very much, comrades, for bearing with us. There's lunch available outside just in the main central area, and there's multiple events going on at the minute. The Labour Women event where lunch is provided, and I believe Labour trade unionists have an event as well. So back in the room for 2:15. Thanks, comrades.
The Labour trade unionists at 3, is it?
Oh, is it?
Or is it?
When is the...